I'm sorry, but ladies and gentlemen, could you please stand again for the singing of the national anthem? Before you take your seats, I will now ask the Reverend Father Michael Blackman to ask God's blessings and presence on this gathering.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty God, Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, source of all power and authority, we ask your blessing upon Elizabeth, our Queen, Dame Sandra Mason, Governor General of Barbados, the Prime Minister, Mayor Motley, on all members of the Cabinet and members of the Houses of Parliament. Grant them your grace, Heavenly Father, that they may discharge their duties with diligence and steadfastness for the well-being of your people and for the advancement of truth and justice to your honor and glory. This we ask through Jesus Christ, our Lord. And we pray for the Barbadian community, that our gifts and talents will be guided and inspired by the Holy Spirit. Father in heaven, look graciously on our scattered community, citizens of this land and of our island home, but all citizens of heaven. Give us such wisdom and gifts of perception that we may so serve in this life, that we may bring honor to our people and above all glorify your holy name. This we ask through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. And we sum up our prayers in the words of the Lord's Prayer as we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you very much. Please sit. Honorable Prime Minister, Mayor Motley, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jerome Walcott, His Excellency, the Barbados High Commissioner to the UK, Milton Innes, Right Excellent Sir Gary Sobers, Sir Charles Williams, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I extend a very warm welcome to all of you assembled here. I believe that we all know why we are here. It was just over a year ago that history was created in Barbados. And this evening we are here to be part of that history, but also to communicate with the architects of that history. I have been searching the annals of history, and in over 90% of the cases, when a people, a nation, or a family itself was without hope, lost dreams, and looking to chart their future, it was always the woman who came to the fore. And this is a context in which we gather this evening to hear the words of hope, renewed dreams, visions for the future. It is in this context that our Prime Minister has come to speak to you to deliver that hope. But before we do that, I would now like to ask His Excellency Milton Innes to come and address you.
Thank you, Charles. Prime Minister, Minister Walcott, distinguished guests, fellow Barbadians, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure on behalf of all at the Barbados High Commission to welcome you here this evening. And I'm heartened by the large attendance, and I thank you for coming. Indeed, a fitting welcome for our Prime Minister on her first visit to the UK since attaining that high office. I have met some of you already, and I've met some of you, some new friends today, and I look forward to meeting many more of you as time goes by. At this point, I'd like to introduce our Foreign Minister, the Honourable Dr. Jerome Walcott. Since taking up office, he has transited London on many occasions, but has not had the opportunity to spend much time here. So I will ask the Honourable Minister if he would now address us. Please join me in welcoming him to the podium. Dr. Walcott.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Honourable Prime Minister, other distinguished members of the High Table, the Right Excellent Gary Sobers, other distinguished guests, friends, Barbadians, and friends of Barbadians, welcome to this evening's proceedings. It has fallen to me rather quickly, the Prime Minister was remarking to me, because we had two distinguished gentlemen up here, and I certainly never expected to be speaking to you within 5 minutes of the national anthem. But that is the way of things sometimes. First of all, I want to say on behalf of the Prime Minister, we are here now. We assumed government in May last year. Some of you have been wondering why it has taken so long for us to get here. You've heard of her going to Toronto, to Montreal, to Washington, and you're wondering about London. First of all, indeed, we were planning to come here in September last year, right after the United Nations General Assembly. We were booked, indeed, the evening that we were supposed to travel to London. We had a change of plans because the tropical storm Kirk was affecting Barbados with flooding and some damage. And we thought it was absolutely necessary, and certainly the Prime Minister felt it was absolutely necessary that she be on the ground in Barbados to look after the welfare of Barbadians. And in those circumstances, I want to apologize to you, but clearly, home drums were beating stronger at that point in time. You all have been following the situation in Barbados over the past 12 months, and even before. All of you would be aware that there was an election, and that, as the Deputy High Commissioner said, the people of Barbados, in their wisdom, chose the Honourable Mayor Motley to be our leader. We made history, and indeed the Prime Minister at that time before the election had indicated that he was going to make history. But we made history, and she made history in becoming the first female Prime Minister of Barbados, in having a political party winning all seats being contested for the first time in the history of Barbados, for a party capturing over 70% of the popular vote, and indeed a political party gaining over 100,000 votes. And this is the measure of the lady, the Honourable Mayor Motley, who is now the Prime Minister of Barbados. But if there was ever a poison chalice that was handed to someone in politics, it was indeed the victory which was handed to the Honourable Prime Minister that in May last year. You had a situation where an economy was in a perilous situation. We had spiraling debt. We had foreign reserves at about 6 weeks. The normal is an average about 12 weeks foreign reserves to provide for 12 weeks of supplies. We had a situation of just about 6 weeks. Our dollar was being threatened in terms of devaluation. This was the situation. In addition, in terms of the social services, they were, I don't want to say in a terrible situation, but certainly we had the spectacle of sewage that many of you would have read and would have seen in the newspapers, strewn on the streets of the South Coast, affecting our tourism situation, with at least 4 countries issuing warnings in terms of going to the South Coast of Barbados. We had the issue of multiple potholes, the issue of water shortages, the issues of garbage collection or lack of garbage collection, and indeed the issues of transportation. Added to that, the system in terms of the social deterioration affecting with violence in the school system. These were some of the issues confronting the new government. But there is sometimes opportunities and benefits of being in opposition. And while in opposition, over the last year, towards the end of 2016, we started working assiduously within the party, planning how we would address many of these issues confronting the country. And so we had the opportunity to gather, to bring in persons from various sectors, private sector, public sector, advisors, and put together a skeleton of a plan that we would use to rebuild our economy, to stabilize the economic situation and rebuild the economy once we were elected. And so, within weeks of having been elected, the government of Barbados was able to release the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, which was called BERT. Some of our detractors referred to it comically in Barbados. But this was in an effort we knew as a party, as a government now, where we had to go, the decisions that had to be taken if we were going to stabilize the economic situation in Barbados and if we were going to restore growth and development. And it had 4 main areas. We said we need to look at fiscal stability. We needed to look at rescheduling of the debt. We need to look at growth. But most of all, we needed to protect the social sector while we did this, while we made all of the difficult changes and taking the difficult decisions which had to be made, which many of you would have heard about. We looked at areas in terms, as I said, of fiscal situation, in terms of revenue, and this was very important. We had heard over the years, and all some of you would have, in terms of the statutory corporations, the state-owned entities, that these were a drain on the public sector and on the finances of the government. We had heard over the years, and studies had been done to show that there were sometimes in some of these, for example, RDC, UDC, NHC, that there was, we were doing the same thing in 3 different entities, and it was inefficient. Well, we did the first thing too, and this is through the good governance and leadership of the Honorable Mayor Mortley. We brought the people of Barbados into our confidence. And before we made any decisions regarding the state-owned enterprises, document was prepared for everyone, asking Barbadians, and this was available online and also in hard copy for all Barbadians. And it asked questions in terms of every state entity. Was it necessary? Was it vital? Could we do without it? Should it be amalgamated with some other entity? And indeed, should we do away with it? And I believe several thousand Barbadians responded. This served to guide us in terms of the reform that was necessary in terms of the state-owned enterprises. In terms of our taxation policy, we said that it was time to look at it holistically. We needed a citizen-centered taxation policy. We needed to look now in terms of consumption taxes, in terms of land taxes. It's a cow. We needed to move away. I couldn't resist that one. We needed to look at lowering personal and corporate income taxes so that we encourage persons to work, to be more productive, and to make productive use of large areas of land in Barbados. And most importantly, to reduce consumption and thereby reduce in terms of our foreign currency, foreign reserves, to increase that. So that was one sector. We then had to look at the area of rescheduling of debt. Fortunately for Barbados, approximately 85% of it, Prime Minister, I believe, is local held debt. About $11.9 billion at that time in terms of rescheduling. It was a painful process, Linda. I know you were affected. But having brought the people into our confidence, we recognized that it was time for all Barbadians to play their part in terms of this effort in rebuilding, restoring, and stabilizing our economy. Indeed, this affected mainly persons who held bonds, who held various certificates and stuff like this. It was a tedious process, but in the end, we had almost 98% compliance, I believe it was, in terms of persons making a decision in terms of perhaps extending the period over which they would receive their interest. Some agreed in terms of reduction in some places. And indeed, in this case, we ensured that we protected those over 65, not you, Linda. So that was one measure. Sorry, I didn't hear you, no sides. And that was a process. We are now involved in the whole issue of the foreign debt rescheduling, and that is proven fairly problematic, but we expect that that will be resolved in the next coming weeks. We then, as I said, needed to look at growth. You're controlling, you're constraining, you're reducing your expenditure, you're increasing your revenue, you've controlled your debt payments because of the rescheduling, reduces your payment and interest by over $500 million per year. So it's giving you some breathing room. We needed to do things to encourage growth in the economy. We recognize over the years, and several of you who've had intentions of returning to Barbados to establish business, have complained about the difficulty and the bureaucratic obstruction to establishing businesses in Barbados. I believe in the World Bank index, Barbados is ranked at about 132nd out of 63 countries for which data is available. While in the Caribbean, we have countries like Jamaica and St. Lucia doing much better. And we said we needed to make this process much easier, to streamline the processes, to encourage persons to establish businesses in Barbados. And we've embarked on a process in doing this. In terms of land development, we've changed the laws to make it easier in terms of the entire process and to allow priorities in terms of applications for development, recognizing that we need to attract development and investment as opposed to keeping it away and acting as though we are some Roman city surrounded by a wall of bureaucracy. In addition to this, we are looking at the whole process of government, how we operate in silos in various ministries, which is inefficient and wasteful. And we need to look at the whole process of deconstruction and reconstruction of systems to make them more efficient and to allow us to be in a process to compete with other countries in the world where we are stagnating behind in terms of these processes. As it relates to the whole issue of using the technology, we've been embarking on a process in terms of digitization, and right now we are about to commence a process within this public service with the help of a grant from the IDB in terms of utilizing Estonian assistance in starting this process within our public service. Of course, it means that persons will have to be trained. I did mention earlier, regrettably, as part of the initial process of stabilization, regrettably, some persons were sent home. We are now looking to reintegrate these persons, retrain them in digitization so that we can find opportunities for them to use new skills and skills which are obviously desirable in a developed world. So these are some of the things that we have been doing in terms of encouraging growth and development. The Prime Minister is going to speak to some more of them. It is always very difficult to speak before the Prime Minister because you don't want to speak into her territory, she being the Ministry of Finance. However, in terms of all of these changes, as I said at the beginning, or we said we had to protect the social services. And with all the difficulties, we had made a promise that university students, Barbadian students attending the University of the West Indies, we would restore the payment of their fees, which we did. We had made a pledge to the public servants in terms of not having a salary increase for probably almost 10 years, and we gave them a salary increase. We increased the pensions to old age pensioners, and we maintained the health services and the basic social services in terms of education in spite of going through these measures. And in all that I have said, we were able to negotiate with the International Monetary Fund, I believe a record in 3 months, that they accepted our BERT policy program, homegrown, and we were able to enter into a program with them for assistance, extended credit facility of, I believe, $290 million US over a period of 3 to 4 years. And this should be commended, again, the leadership of the Honorable Mayor Mortley. I believe there is no country in the world that can boast that they entered into discussions with the IMF and arrived at a program within 3 months. And for this, we have to commend the Honorable Prime Minister. But I move on quickly. In terms of the South Coast sewage, I mentioned at the beginning that we inherited a situation where that was flowing on the streets in the south of Barbados. Over the past months, we should praise the Barbados Water Authority under the leadership of Minister Wilfred Abrams in bringing that situation to halt. It is now under control. We have done some repairs, and we are working now towards moving that South Coast sewer system towards becoming a tertiary treatment system so that the whole issue of that awful situation should never occur. And we are working towards that. So that is an achievement that we've instituted. We are still having issues in terms of public transportation, and I believe that many of you would be aware that in terms of public transportation, you need to order buses and procure buses. It is not like going to a supermarket and taking up a tin of milk or a bag of potatoes. Buses have to be ordered under certain specifications, and it takes time in terms of having them manufactured. And where a country, for example, like Brazil, might be, not Brazil, perhaps Argentina could order 500 buses and we want 60 or 70. Obviously, in terms of the production, they're going to go towards the volume. And in terms of the pecking order, obviously we will have to wait. And we are working in terms, meanwhile, in getting buses repaired. We've allocated sums of money to get parts brought in so that we can perhaps repair several of those which have been waiting parts for several months. And we've entered into a partnership in terms of the private sector, allowing some private sector providers to enter into partnerships with the Transport Board to provide services in certain areas. In terms of the road situation, we have allocated, I believe it was $15 million to buy equipment that the Ministry of Public Works had desired and requested several years. This has been provided, and we are seeing road improvement. Again, Sir Charles, I don't know. I suspect that you're benefiting. Remember I said everyone benefits, you know? In terms of the garbage situation, this is improving, but it's still not where it should be. And we are working assiduously in terms of having the situation and, again, having trucks brought in as soon as possible. Again, it's a matter of manufacturing of these trucks. In terms of healthcare, we had made a pledge in terms of the waiting time of the Accident and Emergency Department of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The Prime Minister pledged $10 million in her first budget within 1 month of the election. Regrettably, not a lot of progress has been made. I think we recognize in some of these situations, you can allocate funds to do a project, but then you encounter certain difficulties. And these, in terms of the A&E, they've been able to introduce a triage system. They've been able to introduce a minor A&E room to allow persons with minor things to move through the system. But in terms of actual construction, they were moving ahead, but in terms of the testing and the soil adjacent to the present A&E department, they've had to back off a bit and perhaps look at going over the other side of the street. So that has been on hold. We were moving progressively towards the utilization of the polyclinics, at least 2 of them, on a 24-hour basis. But we've met with an issue in terms of a shortage of nurses. And I see one who worked with me years ago at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Yes, you. And in terms of this, we obviously need some of you, not only in terms of your remittances or in terms of buying property, but we need your experiences and your skills. Some of you, we need you to come back home and assist in these processes. You should not have a situation where in a country of Barbados, 14 by 21, several polyclinics, and for every injury or whatever, after 10 o'clock at night in some cases, because that is only one polyclinic, you have to go to the Accident and Emergency Department. It obviously would make the situation worse. And this is an area where we certainly need some of you to consider looking at and perhaps assisting us. I believe I've said enough, PM. Without covering too much of what you wanted to deal with. I, in closing, just want to extend to all of you, welcome back home. I know that the mission has been assiduously speaking to you about the Week Gathering 2020. I know they've had several meetings with you. I know that they've been mobilizing you and encouraging you to come back to Barbados during the year 2020. It's called Week Gathering 2020, a special year, kicking off, encouraging Barbadians to come back home. We're looking at it in an interesting way in terms of using the parishes, so that St. Lucie would kick it off in January. Hopefully people like my dear friend in the second row would find time to come back home in February. We're looking at St. Thomas in March, St. Joseph in April, but culminating with Christ Church in October, November St. Michael, and indeed in December, encouraging all of you to come home, not only to celebrate, not only to reunite with your family and friends, but also to become involved in investment opportunities in Barbados and seeing how you can assist the country of Barbados in reaching the stellar heights which we had reached before we met with this decade which is being called a lost decade in terms of growth and development. I am begging you, beseeching you. Thank you all and good evening.
And now for the moment that you've all been waiting for. The lady needs little, if any, introduction. She has spent 30 years this year in the political arena, although she's only 29. She has broken many ceilings. Her love of Barbados is without question and knows no bounds. She is our first female Prime Minister and an exceptional lady. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Honourable Mia Amor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados.
Keep them flying high, keep them flying high. Thank you very much. The Right Excellence Sir Garfield Sobers, National Hero of Barbados, distinguished Barbadians all, because that is who all of you are. I want to say that this is very much an emotional evening for me. But before I explain why, I first apologize for my voice. I think that the air in France and London has done me in. And I have what many of you good old Bajans would call a fresh cold. But not even that fresh cold could keep me away from being here from you this evening. The Minister of Foreign Affairs has already indicated to you that we set out to come here last September, and the global environment that is suffering so badly from climate change, thank you, conspired to keep me away from you. And on that same day that I addressed the United Nations General Assembly, we had a tropical storm which mercifully could have been a lot worse, but for those who it affected was devastating, and which in fact was bad enough to trigger a payment out from the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Fund because of the severity that it had in the areas which it affected. But I said to you that this evening is an emotional one for me too. I haven't been to London for a decade, not because I didn't want to, but because just simply the pace of wanting to rub shoulders and to do what we had to do at home was an all-consuming one. But this is the only country that I've lived in other than Barbados. And I came to this country at the tender age of 17 years old to attend university. And I spent just under 5 years here. And I have always believed that part of who I am has been shaped by my experience here at the London School of Economics and Political Science, but more importantly by the Barbadians and other Caribbean people who adopted me and nurtured me and helped me become a woman. I look at Jackie Kaiser because when Independence Day comes, and I do ignorance like I did last Independence Day, and sing God Bless BIM on Independence Day, it is because I know what it is to be away from home in November, deep November, with the skies dark and the evening falling earlier than you would want it to fall, and the rain falling, and the only thing that could warm your heart was walking up and down Oxford Street and Tottenham Court Road, and the mission was not in Tottenham Court Road in those days, singing God Bless BIM on Independence Day. And people looked at the two of us as if we were two mad people, wondering what these two young girls were singing. But being here for those 5 years gave me an appreciation for our country and our heritage, and allowed me to develop, I believe, an even deeper love for what it means to be Barbadian, what is so special, and what is necessary to preserve and to save. Being here, and in those days, the West Indies were still winning and not losing by 15 runs. You felt like a giant when people talked, because there were still so many who had been around, who had been here for that fateful summer in 1966, Gary, and who could recall firsthand what it meant to be here. And it wasn't only about being Barbadian, to be fair, it was about being Caribbean. So that when the BBC archives pulled out footage of Lord Kitchener landing in the United Kingdom for the first time, some of you may remember the footage to which I refer, when he sang on that boat, "London is the place for me, bududum boom budum." And that is as close as I will come to singing. For I have the excuse today of a hoarse voice. But I say these things because I'm not sure that we spend enough time understanding and appreciating that the moment that has fallen upon us as a people is one that gets us and forces us to redefine citizenship and to redefine the engagement with our people. I have said for a long time that the moment was coming when the concept of diaspora would change. And these things called the phones and the WhatsApp and the FaceTime and all of the platforms that are now available to us mean that many of you can speak to people at home more often and see them more often than you see people living in Reading or Birmingham, in spite of the fact that you could get on a train and see them. And that, short of not being able to hug and kiss them, your daily engagement and relationships with home now allow you to contemplate being active Barbadian citizens, even as you live in this part of the world. And this is the message that I've been carrying to New York, to Toronto, to Montreal, to Washington, to London. And in fairness, I hope that when I come back to England, we'll be able to go up to Birmingham and we'll be able to do Manchester, because we need more than ever to claim those who want to be Barbadian. And as I say, you can be Barbadian by birth, which many of us are. You can be Barbadian by descent, which a lot of you in this room are. And we are going to get to talk about how we're going to right-size that, because we don't only have children, we have grandchildren. And that's a natural part of your family. And we can be Barbadian by marriage, which some of you are. And then you can be Barbadian certainly just by choice. And I say all of the time that Barbadians by choice tend to be the most passionate. Barbadians by descent tend to be the most nostalgic. And Barbadians by marriage tend to be the most committed, because they have to put up not just with a country but a spouse. But when you begin to understand that in order for us to go where we want to go as a nation and to do the things that we want to do, we need more people coming forward in our name with the common mission of making Barbados the best country that it can possibly be, and allowing Barbadians individually to be the best that they can be wherever they are. And we take pride. We take pride at these things. So where and wherever a Barbadian achieves, believe you me, raise the flags there again for me. We raise those flags. Last night in Paris, we have not yet fielded a women's football team that has qualified to the FIFA Women's Finals, but we will, and we're working on it. But as soon as intermission came, as I sat there behind President Macron and them, the first song, the very, very first song to be played in that stadium of 45,000 people that was on fire and magnified by obviously 3 French goals, was Rihanna's song. And the stadium went wild. So that we got there anyhow. Malcolm X said, by any means necessary. But we will get there in its own right too, because Gary reminded them that when the West Indies team won the T20 women's team, the T20 championship, 7 Barbadians were on the team of 11. So we understand what it is in the shadow of people like Sagari to understand global excellence. But there are other people achieving excellence in all the forms that it comes. And excellence is not just only about outward achievement in sports and academia and public life and business. Excellence for me, as redefined in Barbadian citizenship, is about having people and raising our young people to be caring, to be conscious, to be confident. What I call the 3 C's. To be caring. Because if you don't, and you are not a caring people, nobody will remember you. There are at least 3 priests that I'm looking at in my immediate sight. And I'm sure that all 3 of them will tell you that when we go to funerals, nobody speaks truly about how much money you have. But they speak about what kind of human being you were and what kind of life you lived. And it is at this point that the mission of church and state is always united, because the people who we raise individually matter. Don't let anybody fool you. And the government which I lead will always, always be concerned about the quality and integrity of the individual Barbadians that we are raising. And why? if you are good people and you treat each other well, you follow the golden rule, then half of the problems that we face in our society and in our world can be dealt with. You will hear more and more of me talk about moral and ethical leadership because it matters. It matters when we're dealing with Venezuela. It matters when we're dealing within CARICOM. It matters when we're dealing with the Middle East. It matters when we're dealing with countries that don't know how to understand and appreciate that however mighty you are, sometimes you still have to say sorry, or sometimes you still have to listen to others. And that's why St. Vincent and the Grenadines became the smallest state in the world to become a member of the Security Council yesterday. And we thank them for having the courage to stand up for what is the best in the Caribbean, and we will continue to pledge our support, not just for canvassing for them, as we did last week and weeks before, but also to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with them as we, in a world that is looking, regrettably, too close to how it looked 100 years ago, have to fight battles that we thought were long settled. Indeed, yesterday, day before yesterday was D-Day. And when these days come around, it causes you to reflect. Because if and only if you could compare today with 100 years ago, point on point, you might be excused in saying, well, these things can happen. But 100 years ago, you didn't have the example of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 100 years ago, you didn't have the example of countries coming together and determining that they wanted the right to determine their future as independent nations and to be able to ensure that their citizens could have rights guaranteed and opportunities provided that were not theirs to have. 100 years ago, we were not blessed with the knowledge or the commitment of these things. And therefore, when we confront this moment in time as a people, it calls for moral and ethical leadership. And why? Because more often than not, it is the children of ordinary people who are voiceless and without power who go on the front line to defend the freedoms and the rights of others. And the last time I checked, you don't come back from the dead. So that we have to appreciate that we live in a world that is far, far different from what it was 10 or 15 years ago. And that we have challenges presenting themselves that require good people to do the right thing because they know better. And if you don't raise good people to be caring, to appreciate the golden rule, you don't want nobody to treat you bad, don't treat them bad. Don't let nobody have to monitor you for that. And you may say, what Prime Minister up there doing talking about all these things? Because I have been in public life now long enough to know that they do matter. And I've been in public life long enough to know that moral and ethical leadership at all levels, from the household to the community to the business to the local government to the national government to the international affairs of people, matter. And that is going to confront us. And more of what we do is going to be determined and constrained by these issues, regrettably, in the next decade, in my own humble view. But we want them also to be confident and conscious. Because if you are confident and conscious, and I should even add curious, you are going to not get comfortable in your skin. You're not going to get into the temple of the familiar and suffer from a culture of contentment. And I want to say that in a very real sense, that was the prelude of the last lost decade. That Barbadians became too comfortable in their skin. And that Barbadians believed, rightfully so perhaps, yes, God is a Bajan, but that in and of itself, the priest here would tell you that faith without works, you know. So that we put in a lot of the early time, we put in a lot of the work, but we started to coast. And we were coasting on a gas tank that had barely fumes in it. But at some point, even the fumes evaporated with time. And we are at a moment in our country's history where heavy lifting is required of us. And I thank Jerome for feeling for my voice and therefore giving you context of history so that I can focus on now and the future. We are at a time where heavy lifting is required. And those who have heard me before or hear about what I say, the other phrase is that many hands make light work. And we know that to be self-evident. I can't lift that table alone. But if 4 or 5 of us lift it, you then ask me, what else do you want us to lift? Because the consciousness that it is possible comes about because many of us are lifting it. And the best example I can give of the heavy lifting is in the approach we've taken to the economy to share the burden. Sharing the burden. 1974 to 76, Barbados had the oil crisis. Shops were closing down, people sent home 3-day week, 6% sales tax, all those things on top of everything. Who took the burden of adjustment? Workers. 1981 to 82, we had a skirmish with the IMF. We went early, so it didn't last long. But who took the limited displacement? Workers. 91 to 94, we had a foreign exchange crisis, a balance of payments crisis. The reserves went down to 1 week. But we didn't have a debt problem. But that crisis led to 4,500 workers going home and an 8% pay cut for all public servants. Who took the burden of the adjustment? Workers. This time round, we have both a monumental debt crisis. Barbados was the 3rd most indebted country in the world 1 year ago when we took over the office of government. 171 debt to GDP ratio if you include the arrears of 19% of GDP, $1.9 billion that of bills just not paid for the last 3, 4, 5 years to third-party people and NIS and other people. And then genuinely 152% in debt that it had. We were the 3rd most indebted country only after Japan and Greece. But in addition to a debt crisis, we had the balance of payments crisis that they would have had in 1991 to 94. And the scale of the crisis was such that the only way we could get out of it while retaining the integrity and the core of who we are is by a shared burden, by many hands making light work. For me and my government to have contemplated that we could have done what Errol Barrow, Tom Adams, or Erskine Sandiford did and asked the workers alone to carry the burden would have meant that the $500 million in interest payments that we have now saved by the domestic debt restructuring would mean that close to 10,000 workers would have had to have gone home. To have sent home 10,000 workers would have been to gut the Barbados Public Service. To reach an anchor, which you have to bring your debt within sustainable parameters, to move from 171% to 60% by 2033. And I can assure you that I will not be around in 2033 because I believe in term limits, personally, would mean that you could not just put the burden on workers. And my government took the decision that we would share the burden and put it on capital as well. In other words, the people who had lent the money to the government, some may even have said that when you lend money to somebody who clearly licking it out at a fast rate is like a parrot being fed by somebody with the habit. I wouldn't put it that way, but I wouldn't dispute others who would. It's just a matter of taste. But what I would say is this, that the same banks and insurance companies made, in the case of the banks, almost $1.5 billion in profit during the very same 10 years of the long-lost decade. And the insurance companies, $2.3 billion in profit. And therefore, they had a little girth and could withstand a little difficulty. And if you come to fasting having eaten properly for the weeks and months before, I suspect you can last a lot longer than others. But the irony is that, therefore, the ability to restructure our debt, and we kept out, don't let anybody fool you, we excluded from the debt restructuring the Bajans who participated in the savings bonds, because there was a level of immorality in our view of running calypso jingles in the last few years to get people to buy the savings bonds and then to have them out there to be on the front line. We accepted that those who traditionally bought treasury bills and treasury notes and savings bonds, that we could not do better initially, but that while we lengthened the period of time within which we would pay back people, we appreciated that those over the age of 60 would not have the same amount of time, and hence, after the domestic debt exchange was successfully concluded, we called back in all under the age of 60. We gave them $20,000 in cash at the end of November, $30,000 in cash for those who had beyond the 20, obviously, up to 50, in March, and then we offered to take the next $200,000 and pay them monthly at the rate of $4,000, I think, a month, $4,000 and change a month for the next 4 years, so that at least $250,000 would be immediately available. And even as we're doing all of this, the work towards a secondary market where people can trade their bonds, because a lot of Barbadian companies and individuals now have bonds, and there are some people who don't mind waiting for the return, and there are some people who want cash up front. And we're therefore putting in place systems that will allow trading to take place with respect to it. But I stopped to pause on all of that to show you, and digressed a bit, to show you that the perspective of sharing the burden and not believing that it is simply workers who must be on the front line all the time to make the adjustment and to pay the ultimate price, was one that could not work this time, because you would be giving workers a bag, paper bag, to hold water, and they wouldn't get very far, and the country equally would not get very far. And that the consciousness that was required with respect to the leadership of our nation at this point in time was a consciousness that we have to come together in order to be able to make the adjustments and to come out of that culture of contentment, so that we literally sow in order to make sure that we can have growth and that we can reap and store for the future again. Because growth doesn't come without sowing seeds. You got to plant them. You got to allow it to grow. And that's why I told the country last week, if you're looking for abracadabra, get a magician. I didn't apply for the job of David Copperfield. And I'm not going to fool people, because that's not the kind of political leadership or expediency or crass engagement that I'm going to have with the people of Barbados. I said to you that part and parcel of who I was shaped by the institutions and the people and the families with whom I interacted, particularly in the first 21 years of my life. And therefore, many of you in this audience, I know, can appreciate that when we say we are going to do something, that we must mean what we say and say what we mean, because that's the only way we're going to build the commitment of people to go beyond the call of duty to build out our nation to be great. I don't want to sound like the man who visited this town earlier this week. But we have, if we are being honest, work to do. And we have to do the heavy lifting to make sure that Barbados can stand tall and stand for what it stood for in the past, but even build upon that to transform a nation and to transform a people. And one of the reasons why I won't say great again either is because it wasn't great for those people who hadn't gotten on the train yet and who have not seen the prosperity or the fruits of enfranchisement. And one of the things that we are trying to do as we do the heavy lifting, part of the consciousness of which I speak, is literally to create that platform where we can have our destiny with the circle of enfranchisement. And what do I mean? In the late 1930s, after the riots took the Caribbean region, from St. Kitts right through, it was clear that we needed a form of enfranchisement that could only be found in mass-based political party formation. And our party became actually the first party in the English-speaking Caribbean to be formed under Grantley Adams and those who met in 1938 on the 31st of March. So you had a form of political party enfranchisement. Within 3 years, it was clear that it was the workers who were being disadvantaged. For the young ones in this audience, there was a time up to the 50s where workers went to work and didn't get holiday with pay. If you wanted a vacation, you'd have to take it and don't get paid. Yes, that happened within the lifetime. The older ones will remember it, but you have to remind the young people how far we have come. There was a time when people, if you borrowed money from your employer, he could take it all back from your next paycheck. Grantley Adams and the Labour Party stopped that because you had literally to recognize that people must live and eat and buy food and pay rent or pay mortgage. And therefore you could only take a certain amount from people's salary when the week comes. So you had unions that became a form of workers' enfranchisement. Your social enfranchisement started in the 50s with the labor laws, with the construction of the 4 major schools that allowed free education to become a natural thing by 61. Grantley Adams, which was West St. Joseph, Parkinson, Princess Margaret, and St. Leonard's, which was Richmond. And those mass-based secondary schools created that social enfranchisement. Queen Elizabeth Hospital was being planned out. All of those things started that process. By the 1960s, Mr. Barr came and with the establishment of the National Insurance Scheme, you then had Social Security enfranchisement. And you had the beginnings of economic enfranchisement started by both Grantley and Barr with the modernization of the tourism industry and industry. By the mid-70s, late 70s, Tom Adams came and with the introduction of special tax incentives for the building out of the credit union movement by allowing all of us to be able to put 100 there and a 200 there and everything in the credit unions, to the point where the credit union movement has over $2 billion in savings in Barbados, 25% of the savings in the country. And that combined with other things that promoted local industry like the solar water heaters, you started to see economic enfranchisement being built. And the critical decision that Tom took to be able to prohibit investment from outside in the public transport sector and in the food sector with respect to franchises. So you don't have any Hertz or Avis or any of them in Barbados. You had Bajans being allowed to treat the public transport and to be able to leave the licenses for their children. Similarly, the branded food chains didn't come. And I say to people all the time when they tell me that Bajans are not entrepreneurial, I say, check every community. Every weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they're selling. Legal and illegal, but they're selling. And the same credit union movement, when we talk about economic enfranchisement, has over 100,000 members. How many countries in the world has 40% of their population as shareholders? But we look at a glass and say, it's half empty. It looks half full to me. But the enfranchisement is not yet over. And with us lies the responsibility now of being able to create opportunities for workers in the delivery of public services. We started with UCAL. The movement has not been perfect, but I'm a Jimmy Cliff girl. I'm a Jimmy Cliff girl. You can get it if you really want, but you must try, and you'll succeed at last. Charles Duncan O'Neill tried to form a political party in the 1920s, He didn't get there, but Grantley Adams came in 1938 with the others and formed it. So let us understand that we have a moment in our history now that allows us to treat to things differently and allows us to be able to say to people, if you are going to share in the burden, you must also share in the bounty. And that is the Barbadian deal that must go forward. And in doing all of that, we recognize that we are going to have to be able to accommodate people to drive investment. If you have savings in Barbados now, you are getting 0.1% in interest rate. When in truth and in fact, if we create some special bonds or create opportunities for investment for Bajans, then it means that you can invest in some hotels. I see Mr. Capaldi here. You can invest in some hotels in the doing. You can invest in some buildings which government will rent back. You can invest in all kinds of things that right now you won't invest all of your savings because that's not human behavior. But you work out what percentage of your savings you can go and invest to get a higher rate of return than what the banks are giving you. And that's why my government is committed to the launching of a number of things. One, growth and innovation bonds, which we will do, particularly with the Junior Stock Exchange, because government itself is not going to take up a lot of new debt, because I just told you that we have to bring our debt down. We've gone from 171% to 125% already because of the domestic debt restructuring, but we still have a long way to go to get to 60%. And we're not going to go there overnight. We're going to do that between now and 2033, the next 13, 14 years. But as we do that, we will borrow only insofar as we are growing. If we are growing and we can accommodate it, we borrow to be able to accommodate it. But that's not the only power government has. Government has the power to legislate, facilitate, empower. So how we treat to you and how we deal with people will change to create the opportunities. For example, Grantley Adams International Airport. Last time any major work has been done there was the 1970s. It has outgrown itself. And for the kind of tourism reputation that we have, the notion of having all those hundreds and thousands of people on a Saturday inside the airport, chock-a-block, cannot work. That's not part of the experience that we want to share as a people. So that we took a decision that we partnered with the International Financial Corporation, which is an arm of the World Bank, and we said to them, look, we're not selling the airport. We're not selling it. We're going to give shares to the workers, and we're going to allow the National Insurance Scheme to buy some shares with it, but government will remain the central majority shareholder. But we recognize that if we don't spend serious money at this airport, we're not going to be able to drive tourism and to pay our bills, to be able to pay for the schools and the hospitals and all of the things that we need to do from the taxes that we gather when we earn from tourism. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to issue a concession that somebody who wants to be able to run it for us, to invest in it, to spend $75 million US so that we can build out. We were walking through, we came in a few hours ago at St. Pancras, King's Cross, and I was reflecting to someone that a train station and an airport is really just a mall with transport. And that we are allowing people to leave Grantley Adams Airport with all the money in the pockets. Don't make no sense. Even walking through the railway station today, you're tempted to stop and buy this and stop and buy that and stop and buy that. I like. And that is what Grantley Adams is desperately missing. And therefore we expect that within the next 9 months or 12 months, we will have a company that has been awarded the contract to work with us to literally significantly expand Grantley Adams Airport by another 27,000 square meters, 75 million US in capital injection, and moving, you should see that construction starting within another 12 to 18 months as a result, another 18 months if we award within 9 to 12 months. But I'm not borrowing. Government isn't borrowing to do that. And therefore you have to think outside of the box to be able to fuel development while at the same time ensuring that we do not in any way compromise the patrimony of the country. Hilton Hotel, another example. A year ago we said we are not selling the Hilton Hotel. And don't get tied up the fact that Mr. Barr was the Prime Minister of Barbados when the Hilton opened on independence, and that it was opened between himself and Conrad Hilton. I don't get tied up with domestic party politics when it comes to the country, so that we are going to defend Mr. Barr's right to have given that gift to the country. And we think it's not just another hotel. It represented the promise of a nation, the belief in a nation that it could excel. And therefore, in spite of the fact that we did some work 20 years ago, a hotel plant gets tired quickly. And it is now in need of major investment. So we have agreed with the company that the last government was going to sell the Hilton to outright. We said to them, we're not selling. But we are prepared to discuss with you opportunities for investment. And one of the things that we can do is that we will allow you to be able to take over, make your investment. And we negotiated a deal that allows us, subject to the approval by all of the shareholders, because while we are the majority shareholder, the NIS and CDB also have a very small stake. But subject to that agreement, we will allow you to invest $20 million US dollars, 40 million Barbados dollars, to refresh it as part of phase 1. We will continue to get the current profit levels that we are drawing, and they will then share with us beyond the profit level that we are now receiving. Now that's the kind of win-win deal that minimizes the risk for the people of Barbados that we want to participate in. But we haven't just stopped there. We recognize that town planning legislation, and this is all part of what I mean by being conscious and confident, that town planning legislation was driving our development from 1965, and it was a headache. They tell people would say they want to do X, Y, Z. Town planning would take the time. Sometimes they would write back and just say no. You scratching your head, you don't know what to do. You write back again. You submit. They say no again 3-4 times. Listen, this isn't a lottery. This is not a lottery. This is an understanding and appreciation that while there must be strong regulation for the protection of the public space and the environment, that there has also to be a facilitating demeanor. And we've now passed legislation in January this year, which will shortly be proclaimed, that says that if you submit plans into town planning and you want to do X, Y, Z, and town planning says, no, you can't, they have to send you back what is known as a conditional refusal, but with a provisional acceptance. So that they will not just tell you no, but they will also tell you what will trigger yes. And both sides have defined time periods, 14 and 28 days, to respond back, and you have a conversation. Either you say, yes, I will do what you want me to do, that you say will trigger yes, or you say, I want a conversation. I want to know if I could tweak here and tweak there and tweak there. And then there's a defined time period within which to get it. Now, we did all of that because we knew that we were about to launch a massive program for the transformation of Barbados, and particular Bridgetown, Speightstown, Old Town, Oistins, Six Roads, and the East Coast. But that the difference this time is that the investment in the productive sectors has to help carry the investment of those who cannot by themselves carry themselves. You understand what I'm saying? So that large amounts of money have to be anchored in investment, will have to anchor planning gains. You know it here in London all the time. Developers want to do X, Y, Z. The government says you can do X, Y, Z, but you must also spend A, B, C. And invariably in London, they use a ratio of about 4 to 6% of the value of the investment for you then to put into low-income housing or community spaces or all kinds of things. depending on the needs. And we have said, look, we need to treat the planning and development like a blank canvas. And we're going to do it. And we're going to make sure, therefore, because on 166 square miles, you got to live good with one another. You have to live good with one another. There's no space or room for bad behavior. There's no space or room for people not getting on with one another. This afternoon we met with a chap from Rwanda, and we were reminded of the tragedy of that genocide where people who were born in the same land just determined that they could not live with one another. And they have now, over the course of the last 25 years, been doing everything to make sure that there is never a repetition of it. And the most interesting thing, Sir Gary, is that what do they want more than anything else from Barbados? To learn to play cricket properly. Well, they came to the right people. But the bottom line is that you have to carry one another. So that last Sunday, I started to announce to Barbadians some of the plans, and we will unfold them more as we go along, for the transformation of Carlisle Bay that will see us, as I said, expanding what we're doing at the Hilton, starting first with the refreshing of it as phase 1, doing the Hyatt, which, while contentious before on 2 lots, is now going to be on effectively 3.5 lots, and the government has, yes, taken the decision to acquire, but we've also constrained and said, look, even as you do this investment, off of 25% of the shares to Barbadians, because of the fact that Barbadians are only getting the 0.1% in savings. So instead of trying to find all of the money from banks or other people, carry along Barbadians as mezzanine financing and equity financing to ease the burden of building what will now be an over 400-room hotel at that spot in the center of Bridgetown on Bay Street. Then on the other side of the careenage, for those, if you can cast your mind back to what Bridgetown looks like, you will see where there used to be Carlisle House. Remember where Carlisle Car Park is? Well, Carlisle House is that round building right there on the water. Fortress bought that, and they submitted the plans to us to look at. We made some tweaks so that they kept the architectural integrity of the round building and not just come with a new design. And that will be another multi-story there. And because it's on the water, the first 2 floors will be like the Hilton, so that the water in a storm surge doesn't happen often, can still flow through. But that is likely to be another multi-story Hilton Garden Inn right there. And then the warehouses on the water in the careenage in the bay itself. The former chairman of Coca-Cola has purchased that, and he is going to spend about 30 million Barbados dollars restoring those warehouses and being able to bring them into a modern, purposeful usage as we go forward. Now, I haven't spoken about the other opportunities there, and as time goes on, I will. I've spoken about the ones that are likely to start within the next year, and for which we have seen plans or financing arrangements or legal arrangements, and therefore they represent a level of specificity and certainty. Equally, I hope, Sir Gary, and I hope that I'm not talking in the wind, we've been talking to people, because I really want to inspire Barbadians to a higher place. The notion that we should only use branded chains from outside cannot be part of the future. And I know that Coral Reef and Sandridge and others over the years, but they were from when? 50s, 60s, 70s. Who are, sorry? Sandpiper, sorry, not Sandridge. That was your other fella. But if I can persuade the other Barbadians that we need to create a brand that can go regional. And what is that regional brand? I feel strongly that it has to be the legends of cricket. That's what people know us for. So Gary, you are a living legend in this country. And you have others that you know, when they with you walk in, people are mesmerized. The likes of Greenwich and Haynes, Sir Wes, Sir Charles Griffith, all of them. And we need to be able to theme a hotel around that thing for which we have global excellence, that thing which countries like Rwanda want us to come and help be able to offer training and coaching, because they recognize in us a set of standards that equates to global excellence. And once you have the legends of Barbados, you can then go to Antigua, you can go to St. Lucia, you can go to Jamaica, the legends of each country. And everything is themed then in terms of cricket. But that is the kind of visioning that we're trying to put out there. And if we can do that, we are prepared to move central purchasing and the gas station from opposite Kensington Oval on the water, because I don't know that you need a gas station and a warehouse on the water. Madness. And shift the road to be able to allow what used to be the old Manning's lumberyard, all of those things then to become the property such that you have a proper 4-star or 5-star hotel opposite Kensington Oval, which still remains the third most iconic cricket ground in the world after Lord's and Melbourne Cricket Ground. And it has not escaped us that a stone's throw away from that Legends Hotel, if we can encourage Barbadian investors to lead it and treat to this project as a national project, is the other living legend. Because anybody who could start going to school on a ZR from Westbury to Waterford and could now be the most successful woman entertainer in the entire globe, in my view, deserves to be recognized in her life as a living legend of Barbados as well. And to that extent, we've been discussing with her family, her brother in particular, and her management, the need for them to establish a major museum with the government in Westbury Road, so that people who leave the cruise terminal as well, or who are at Kensington visiting for cricket, have another iconic thing besides the Legends of Barbados Museum there at Herbert House. Within a stone's throw again, you have the Rihanna Experience and Museum. And we hope that her family and the government can work together to make that a meaningful experience, in the same way that when you go to Kingston, you go and visit Bob Marley House. Anybody ever went? I put up my hand too. But we have to be able to share our story with the world and allow them to come. Now, all of these things in Carlisle Bay and the others that will come will only mean something in the long run if we carry along the people in the Orleans, and carry along the people uptown, and carry along the people in the Bayland, and carry along the people in Harts Gap, and carry along the people all around. So that from Bats Rock to Harts Gap, from the coast to the highway, including the Ivy, including Pine Wildy, including Eden Lodge, Bush Hall, Bank Hall, Black Rock, I ain't laughing out none. I'm pacing myself this evening, but the voice holding. That those people, Barbadians living in these communities, I would not know how to have represented, and next month represents 30 years that I have a relationship with the people in my constituency from the time I was nominated, not elected, because I don't determine relationship by success. I determine relationship by when you and me meet and start working together. I would not, as the heart, I would not know how to leave public life without carrying those people who for too many decades have been ignored. And some still have pit toilets, and some just need access to loan funds, some need the title sorted out, some need... There are myriad problems that have led to too much derelict housing within the urban corridor. And if we therefore are going to drive virtually $3 billion US in investment in the next 7 to 10 years in Carlisle Bay alone, I didn't get the whole town or Spikestown or the other areas, then we need to be able to anchor it by having planning gains that are about 5% of that, which is about $150 million US or $300 million in the next decade to spend in the urban corridor to improve the lives of ordinary Barbadians who are not just tenants, but who must be owners in their own land and empowered and enfranchised. And we will do the same thing in the other districts where properties are being developed. There are going to be some, like Blue Horizon, that are not in the middle of a town, but they too will be subject to the same planning gains because both Blue Horizon and Caribbean Hotel are near St. Matthias and Harts Gap, as is Savannah. And we are going to make sure, therefore, that we carry along people. And I mentioned Blue Horizon and Caribbean because for those who felt that the only thing that's happening is Carlisle Bay, they're wrong. And we expect, the plans are in for Blue Horizon, and we expect a major hotel to be built there. In fairness, the last government started to discuss the joint venture, but never got very far. And with respect to Caribbean Hotel, we have had persons who we know have approached the owners of that property, and the planning process has started in earnest for a new hotel to replace what has been a derelict eyesore for more than a decade now, right there on the coast. Similarly, the government will be advertising Savannah Hotel for requests for proposals, and as I explained, we'll be shifting the road. Excuse me. Many of you know Hastings Police Station, the old one. Well, we've built a new police station on the other side of the road, and therefore the police will be moving from that. And once that happens, we will therefore have the opportunity to shift the road, expand the footprint of Savannah, and the government, as the major owner through Hotel and Resorts Limited, will be advertising for requests for proposals to see which is the best deal we can get for building out that hotel, because it can do a lot more than it is currently doing, and we know that it can be more successful. Sam Lord's Castle, same thing. The last government borrowed from the Chinese, but we don't have a difficulty in principle with that. It's just that given what they left us with the debt, and given the madness that we have to deal with, we cannot afford to be borrowing and building out hotels when there are ordinary Bajans and foreign investors working together who can do that. So if I end up spending money in building out Sam Lords, then we cannot spend the money to do the roads and to do the other things which were ignored for more than a decade. Every single institution and every single major piece of infrastructure in Barbados was literally left in an awful and despicable state of repair, from the water infrastructure to the roads, to the traffic lights, to the hospital, to the schools, and I can go on and on. Every major piece of equipment that needed maintenance, no money has been spent on maintenance. The chillers at the building, the bark building, is what it's called nowadays, in Warrens, you know what I mean. The chillers were not maintained for almost a decade, and therefore all of the chillers dealing with the air conditioners have now to be urgently replaced by us as a government. And if you don't do that, then 13 ministries that are housed in that building will come to be affected. In the same way that they didn't maintain the same chillers and air conditioning at the law courts. We built this wonderfully new building. Building still look good. But if you don't maintain the inside of the building and the plant, what happens? I had to move a whole. The last thing that the last government presided over was literally having to move out the law courts before they lost office. And the law courts then had to be spread all over the country and could not function effectively, to the point where, in spite of the fact that we have agreed as a government to create 3 new criminal courts and to create a new dedicated commercial court so that people can get in and out with disputes, be it domestic business or international business, in short order, in quick time. We have had to pause and wait because we had nowhere to house them, because the courts had to be literally, we had to evacuate people move people from there into other buildings in order to be able to fix the roof and the chillers that were affected. But I say all of this to tell you, therefore, that it makes no sense us trying to hold on and build out Sam Lord's Castle. So we will also be advertising for requests for proposals to see who best can take over that and build it out as the major hotel that it deserves to be. Those advertisements should be out within 2 or 3 weeks. And therefore we expect there's a lot of interest from people with respect to wanting to buy it and to finish building it. What's the common thread in this story? One, that confidence has returned to Barbados and the future of Barbados. Keep them flying. You know, people might feel I know who you all are, but I can meet you after the speech. Secondly, that the growth path that my government will take will not be for the few, but it will be for all Bajans, and we are carrying everyone along. And what we cannot do directly by way of how we spend money ourselves, we will do through the power of legislation, regulation, and empowerment, by making sure that through planning gains, that we are in a position, therefore, to be able to carry those people whose existence otherwise more resembles a late 19th century or early 20th century Barbados rather than a Barbados of the 3rd decade of the 21st century. But it isn't only in tourism. In the other town planning matters, and Sir Charles, you are here, there are others who have been here, and I want to thank all of you, because a planning gain at the end of the day is a contractual arrangement. Because you don't have to do it in the same way that we don't have to give the development to. But it is really a contract. And we determine that there has to be a different deal, not just for those in the urban corridor, but also for those who live in housing estates that are woefully overcrowded and that are responsible for a lot of the social problems that we have in the country today. And similarly, that there has to be a new deal for the public servants of Barbados who for 10 years did not get a salary increase until we gave them a 5% salary increase last July, August, for the first time, as I said, in a decade effectively. And for whom, particularly those earning under $4,000, they can't afford to buy land at $20 and $25 a square foot and then build a house. You're talking about a policeman earning $2,700 a month. You're talking about a nurse sometimes earning $3,000, $3,200, or a teacher. Now their parents in a modern independent Barbados would have been able to afford a house of comparable standards in a West Terrace, in a Oxnard. But these people now would not be able to afford if you're starting to buy land at $25 a square foot. So what do we have to do? We've got to bring down the price of land. We've got to bring down the price of developing the land. We've got to bring down the cost of construction, which is a little more difficult. And that's not meant in a bad way. It's largely because there's so many products that are from overseas that we don't have control over. Whereas with the laying of the pipe for the water and the roads and things, there's a lot more local stuff that can be there too. And we have to bring down the cost of the mortgages to make sure that it's not just large commercial enterprises that can borrow at 3 and 3.5 and 4%, but that smaller people can get access to lower cost mortgages, and some people are borrowing at 7 or 8 still. So that we feel that the first way to start is by getting planning gains to build up a land bank that we're not paying for. And what we've done as a government is to say to large developers who want planning permission to develop large tracts of land that we will agree, but you've got to put 30, 40 acres, depending on which one it is, 35, 40 acres to help us with the New Deal for housing for public servants, and similarly, to be able to reduce the density in areas like the Pine Wildy and Silver Hill, Gall Hill. There are some of you who still remember the public housing that Grantley Adams built, Errol Barr built in the 50s and 60s. The house, in some instances, is no wider than this platform. In some instances, it goes from here to where the end of the table by the High Commissioner there. It was meant for one, a parent or Pine Wildy housing area. We already have identified at Yorkshire Searles another 35 acres for Silver Hill, Gall Hill area. So Charles, I thank you and your people for the St. Swithin's site visit, and we have acreage there that will go now to the public servants, New Deal for the public servants. We have discussions going on with another major enterprise in land in St. Lucie too, and the government has some marginal lands as well attached to the Clico estates that we will use in St. John also for the New Deal for public housing. So that little by little, my friends, we will create that New Deal for the public servants. And we are satisfied that when we sold Barbados National Bank to Republic Bank, with it went an institution that served Barbadians well for decades. It was called the Barbados Mortgage Finance Corporation. And in that institution, we had the ability to give mortgages to poor people and low-income people. The default rate at the Barbados Mortgage Finance Corporation was less than 3%. And what was more important was that it had an insurance policy built into the mortgages. So if you lost your job or something happened to you and became incapacitated, the mortgage would be protected because we had built into that whole process an insurance policy to keep the mortgage going. These are the things that define a government that is not only interested about growth, but is interested about development and carrying the people with them, because unless you carry people with you, the distance you walk is not sustainable. It's as simple as that. And therefore, my friends, consciousness and confidence anchored by caring, fueled by a little curiosity, because you must always be searching, are the things that make for our progress going forward as a people. I said that I wanted to talk to you about this special moment in time, because we can't do all of that at home alone. We need many hands, and we need you, therefore, to see yourself as active citizens of Barbados. And what does citizenship entail? Citizenship entails, yes, you get benefits, but you also have obligations. And that some of you may decide that you want to be able to invest at home. From July, we will be allowing the holding of foreign exchange accounts by Barbadians and not just special enterprises. So many of you will be able to open up foreign exchange accounts in Barbados from next month, not just in Barbados dollars, like the ones you have, but you'll be able to hold your money and to use it as you please in that way. Similarly, a lot of the investment that we're talking about, and I haven't talked to you about renewable energy yet, I haven't talked to you about the opportunities for medical cannabis yet, but those are the two new industries that are going to drive investment in Barbados going forward. And renewable energy is critical because renewable energy allows us to save foreign exchange while at the same time having the benefit of the patrimony of the country. And I will shortly be announcing at home the framework for what is the level of local participation that must be involved in all renewable energy projects, because what are we doing? We're using the sun or the wind or the water or whatever that is the people's, is part of the patrimony of the country. And while we want foreign investment, we feel that that foreign investment must be anchored by local participation in both renewable energy and the cultivation of medical cannabis. But those announcements will be made as to the details when I am on terra firma in Barbados. So that your opportunity to play a role as an investor, your opportunity now to play a role also as a mentor, because many of you have come to England or have been born in England and have a skill set that will amplify or complement what the country has and needs in order to grow further. I make the point all the time, and the National Population Commission will report in a few months' time, that in the Caribbean, our population sizes are too small. And that's part and parcel of why we've seen the chronic underperformance in our economies in the last 3 to 4 decades. Guyana, the size of this country, with Scotland and Wales, you got 65 million people here. Guyana struggling for 780, 800,000 people. Suriname, the size of, larger in fact, than the Netherlands. Netherlands has 17 million people. Suriname has 580,000 people. Belize, size of Israel. Israel has 8 million people, not to mention all the Jews all over the world, because they're the best at the kind of citizenship that I'm talking about today. Because once you are a Jew, you have an allegiance to Israel regardless of where you are in this world. Not true? Once you're a Bajan, you need to have an allegiance to where? Now you know why 2 mad young girls used to walk about Oxford Street singing God Bless Bim. Inspired by those leaders who went before. But Barbados is 430 square kilometers. Singapore is 670. 20% of Singapore's land, 140 square kilometers, is reclaimed land. 140. So if you take that out, that would bring Singapore down to 530. But Singapore has 15 times our population. We are 300,000. Singapore is somewhere between 4.5, 5 million people. Are you beginning to understand my drift? Singapore has not produced a Gary Sobers or a Rihanna. St. Lucia has produced two Nobel laureates, Derek Walcott and Sir Arthur Lewis. Pound for pound, the Caribbean can take on anybody in this world. the scholarship, the creativity, the commitment. But what matters is how we frame out and do what we have to do. You know, I'm satisfied that we make a strategic mistake, Sir Gary, in playing football as nation states. And that if we played football as a West Indies team, we would be winning World Cup football, men and women's. And part of it has to do simply with scale. Has to do with scale. And therefore, I say to you that however great we are conscious that we need to be able to expand the numbers who come to their lives every day and call themselves Bajan. Every day. And what is it that you can do to add to what we are doing, whether it is in healthcare or education or investment or tourism or business, whatever it is. We have Ross University opened in Barbados. Within 6 months, it opened. I got a call the first week after we were in government saying, are you interested? We're looking at 3 countries. Would you be considered? And we said yes. And in less than 6 months, we turned an opportunity into a reality that now has 1,500 students living in Barbados with 100 faculty and coming to work every day, adding value to what we do in Barbados. We need a few more universities. We need to be able to have 1 or 2 more healthcare facilities. And our constraint for the provision of healthcare cannot be based on the numbers of people living in Barbados alone, because Barbados must be an educational and medical hub for people to travel to and get services. In the 18th century, George Washington, the first president of the United States of America, went to 1 country and 1 other country alone in his life, and it was Barbados. And he came to Barbados because his brother had TB, I think, or a bad respiratory problem in any event, and needed Barbados's climate to recover. So this is nothing new, but we just need to repurpose how we do it. And we need to see ourselves being able to say to the University of London and others, in the same way that you reached out and formed the University of the West Indies over 70 years ago, we need to be able to have 2 or 3 British universities having campuses in Barbados, delivering from Barbados those things that may be better delivered from the tropical climate, or for which our services and our skills may be more appropriate in treating and teaching to young people. These are the things that will make a difference. We need to be able to see some of you who have been able to expand your opportunities up here, determine and say, look, a 7 or 8 hour flight means nothing, because you can do business from there. And that allows you to reach out to Africa, with whom we have a stronger and stronger relationship by the year. To reach down to Latin America, South America, to reach up to North America, or to reach up to Europe, because Barbados is ideally placed to be that hub of choice in the southern corner of the world. But these things can only make sense if we have enough people driving the process. And that's why the first exercise in repurposing the mission and getting Barbadians to lay claim to what can be a grand future is the Gathering 2020 next year, where we gathering from St. Lucie in the north in January down to St. Michael to the 29th of November. And why the 29th of November? Because from the 30th of November, when we lay claim to the anniversary of the nation state Barbados, then the celebration must be for all 11 parishes from the 30th of November to the 31st of December. I want Barbados to be popping next year. I want you to have to squeeze up with your family and your house. Don't mind if you can't get a hotel room. I want Bajans overflowing in Barbados next year. And parish by parish by parish, we start there. Why? Because when you go to St. Lucie in January, or when you go to St. Peter in February, you have the opportunity not just to do family reunions, which are important, because how did I start talking today? The importance of caring, the importance of family. Because without family and without caring, you don't have the core to keep you going day to day to day to day, and to be true and to be real. But you also then have the opportunity to deal with your primary school. Or if you were lucky enough to have your secondary school in the same district, and to recognize that if you don't give back, you're really not paying forward. Other people paid forward for you. It is time for us to pay forward for our children and our grandchildren. You have the opportunity to go to your churches that raise you and give you that moral compass to be who you are. And you need, a lot of churches in the country need support, and there will be that chance for you, parish by parish by parish, to be able to help. But then at the national level, we are choosing two major projects. One, the National Botanical Gardens. And fortunately, when Prince Charles came, he is the patron, I believe, of the Botanical Gardens, and also is involved with Kew here. But Barbadians need a space. How much ever Queen's Park looked big when he was a child? It don't look big now. Or King George V. But Barbadians need a space where they can recreate, and where for hundreds of acres, you go out there, Hyde Park, you go all about. And you understand the importance of being able to recharge and to relate to nature. The second major project will be our healthcare facilities, our hospitals. Because whatever will happen, and even as we sow, to grow, to reap, to store, that takes time. And while the government will do some of what it has to do, essentially all like now, in terms of critical pieces of equipment that have been left languishing and not working in the last decade, there's still so much to be done that we want those of you to help us to be able to, as a national project, to invest in what I call the hospitals of Barbados, because we need a modern children's ward. We need to be able to have modern cardiac facilities. We are already agreeing to build out a modern accident and emergency. The plans have finished. The government will spend about $11 million in doing it, because you cannot treat people like cattle when they are in their most painful moment. Either them or their family, who are waiting and with an anxious spirit, not knowing what is going to happen to them on the other side of the emergency room. And therefore for us, that is a priority, to get it right, because people, particularly who don't have a choice, ought not to suffer because of the circumstances of their birth. And for the people who have money, if you get in an accident or you have a heart attack or a stroke, there's no time to carry you nowhere else. So so we're going to get it right. And we're going to also get it right because I know we can do better, but it requires effort and it requires application. And my government has said that that healthcare and agriculture cannot anymore be the stepchildren of a modern Barbados government. They must be treated properly. So my friends, I'm conscious that I have tortured you for a long enough time with a voice that is hoarse, but I suppose I told you that this is an emotional evening for me, coming back to that place that helped shape me. And I suppose I have felt in me a little pang of guilt that I could not get here sooner. But you know what they tell you, drunk or sober, mind your business. We had to stop the bleeding. And at 4 o'clock on the morning when the results were announced, I said to Barbadians from Roebuck Street one thing, that there is no magical bullet. There's no silver bullet, there's no magical formula, there's no elixir. But that we make you one promise, that we're going to stop the rot and the bleeding, and that we are going to while stopping the rot and the bleeding, we are going to lay the platform for transformation. It does not happen like that by abracadabra. And those who want to regale themselves with the belief that we are sitting an exam and expect to have 100%, you're dealing with the wrong person. Because I've lived long enough to know, and I've done in my life jobs that caused me from a very early age, when you represent people whose liberty or whose lives can be affected, that what is required of us is first and foremost to be faithful and truthful to the mandate, whether it is as an attorney or whether it is as a representative within the public sphere. Secondly, not just to be faithful and truthful to the mandate, but to never stop, to be persistent, to put in more than would normally be required. And I appreciate all of those of you who wish me all the best and tell me to slow down and to take it easy. And I'm not going to be foolish with my health, but I also want you to know that the passage to carry this country to stability and prosperity is a very narrow passage, and that if you fall off, particularly in the early years, then you have hell to try to come back. And there are things beyond our control, like hurricanes or earthquakes, that we simply have to make sure that if that is to befall us, that we are strong enough to recover and to fight back. And that is why we have been running this race as hard in the early part as we have been running it. When we get to this point now where it can ease a little bit, not a lot, but you can ease a little bit, and asking people to stay the course, because after a few days of medication, you start to feel good. But the system, the whatever is in your body still there. You haven't gotten rid of it yet. And therefore, don't be foolish. Don't stop taking the antibiotics after the 3-4 days because you're feeling a little better. Don't go drinking a drink with the antibiotics because you're feeling a little better, because you will get sick again. But what I'm asking Barbadians the world over, stay the course with us. We got this, trust me, we got it. But stay the course with us, because we also understand that you cannot recover from a decade in a year or 2 years, but it is a process. And why am I saying that to you? Everybody, particularly in this country, many of you can recall that there were others who did it for you and helped to pay forward for us. We have children and grandchildren for whom we must pay forward. And we have an environment, a coral reefs that are dying, a country that needs cleaning up, that we have to pay forward. But I am confident, my friends, that as always, if we show the resilience of our parents and grandparents, if we show the capacity to be confident, if we can be caring, if we can be curious so that we never become contented with a little progress rather than pursuing greatness, I am confident that we can make Barbados a place to be admired and to be literally the best place that all of us can live in and raise our children in, and make that definable difference to a world that more than ever needs leadership that speaks to moral and ethical leadership and that speaks to the preservation of our climate, our world, our environment, and that speaks to the need not just to allow money to flow, but also to recognize that migrants and people need the ability to be able to move to in pursuance of opportunity, but also away from hardship and oppression wherever it happens on this earth. Barbados' voice must be that moral voice. Barbados must be that place of opportunity. Barbados must reflect excellence in all that we do. And if we can do that, that is a mission that will take at least a decade. But if we do it, the next few decades are secure for your children and grandchildren. God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of Barbados. The Prime Minister is going to take some questions from you, but she wishes to rest her voice for a few minutes. 2 minutes. In the process, there are a group of people, in fact, there's a segment of a population that is very dear to the High Commissioner's heart and my heart as well, and that is the youth. And we have here with us this evening all those persons who took part, in fact, some of the persons who took part in the Miss Barbados UK pageant. They're here with us, and we would like to introduce them to you this evening. Starting with the ladies over here, we have the Queen, we have all of them, and we would like you to come just on the platform so that the Barbadians may see you. Oh, you're all here. Oh, you're the Queen, right? Let me say that when we went to that show a few weeks ago, the Governor General herself was very impressed with what she saw, and not only with the pageantry, not only with the young ladies, but the person who did most of the production. And she too is a young lady herself. And I would like you to meet Shakira Hamblin, who was responsible for that entire show, as well. I don't know the other lady's name, but they were very, very impressive that evening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the future of Barbados. Come on. Thank you very much. I don't know you all. I can't remember the names, but I know you're the Queen, right? Right. Very, very well done. And congratulations to all of you.
1, 2, 2, 1.
We also want to introduce to you, thank you very much, ladies. Milton, come here.
I have been roped in. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Anita Aline, who, taken up in September, will be the first female, what is the expression? Of Jesus College. What is he?
Yeah.
Master, sorry. Yeah, the first female master of Jesus College, Cambridge.
1, 2.
And, and Sunita was born in Barbados and then came up to England, so she is a Barbadian. Sunita, please.
He forgot that I told you they got Bajans of all types, but she's a Bajan by birth. But the ones who want to be Bajan by choice, don't let him turn you off.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. I was real surprised to get invited onto the stage. I thought that me and Motley speaking was inspiring. I might have looked like I was like just on my phone, but I was taking notes. I was just like, yes. But yeah, I'm so proud to be here today, and you know, a Bajan by birth, by choice, by descent, and just being in the room with everyone. This is my first public engagement since being appointed to the post of Master of Jesus College, Cambridge. And it was a very easy decision to make to kind of come here today. I don't take the post up until October. I'm not doing much press or other public engagements, but coming today and just being able to be here as a Bajan and to say I'm very proud of having taken up the post. It's a great community at the college, and in a way I won't take too long, but it's really funny because you sort of make history, and I'm aware that it's a historical event, but during the process of applying for the job, I was applying for a job, and just doing the best that we can. I think we do that every day when we step out, when we get up. We do the best that we can, and it's like my parents, my sister's here today, my brother's in Zurich, but my parents were always saying, you've got to be better, you've got to do the best you can, and I think just doing that throughout my life and doing that throughout our lives is the way to go. So thank you, and it's been inspiring listening to you.
I just want to say how proud Sunita has made us. When we heard, I wrote her immediately because this is the kind of inspiration, but however much I was proud at your appointment, we're prouder of what you just said, because what you just said applies to each and every one in this room and beyond, because I know that part of being Bajan is about inspiring our children to do better and to just simply not accept that this is your lot in life. And if we can do that, believe you me, I am satisfied truly that we really will punch above our weight in this world again. Thank you. I go on Monday afternoon to speak at the Oxford Union, but do not take that as any indication of preference. And I come from a lineage that is anchored here in London at LSE. So.
Well, I was jealous to hear you were going to Oxford. I was like, what? Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning I said that this gathering is taking place in the context of history. And before our very eyes, we see that we are even part of that history because we're seeing it being created in our midst. With that said, I know that you have some questions for our Prime Minister. We have 3 microphones. And if my mathematics serves me right, there'll be a microphone for each segment, each section. However, we will do it orderly. We will take a question from this side, one from the center, and one from the other end, and then we alternate and come back. Is that clear? So I don't want anybody to say, I had my hand up ever since, and ignore me. We're taking one from here, and one from here, and then we come back here. So if you may form a line, then it will make the process much easier. Is that clear? Is that clear? Good, I'm got me sound like a teacher. Come, where's the microphone? Good. Oh. Oh, wait a minute. I said we should form a line so that it will be done orderly from here. I can't see all the way back. All right, we're ready? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Miss Motley. Yes, I know you're smiling.
We're not hearing the microphone.
1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Good evening, Miss Motley. Welcome. Nice to see you again. The last time I saw you was at the Argentine embassy the day after you were elected. We have a picture together, and I spoke to you at Brandon's Beach before about your plans to develop the beach into a sport hub. Is that still going to happen at some time? I know you have a lot of stuff to do, and that may not be a priority, but is that still going to happen? Also, with the we're pushing sport tourism as a hub. Is anything going to be relaxed on concessions to all the different entities that run sport? The football. I work for the Football Association in Barbados. I'm the assistant technical director. We're trying right now to recruit players from London, Europe, wherever, to represent Barbados. But at the moment, our laws kind of hinder us because there's a problem with second generation families not being able to represent us. And we want to have a discussion about that. I know you've spoken to Randy about it, but we want to have a discussion about that because the situation is this, like how the guy Archer was recently inducted to play for England, even though he was born in Barbados.
Okay.
The same at the present cannot happen in Barbados because we're not allowing second generation Barbadians to represent Barbados. Is that going to be changed in the near future? The question is, two questions. Are we going to develop Brandon's Beach first? You heard the question?
Pass the mic.
And the second question is, are we going to change the laws to allow second generation Barbadians to be able to represent Barbados in various sporting entities?
Yeah. No, I got the questions. I think I hinted to you earlier that we are going to review our immigration. In fact, I had done a white paper when I was Minister of Home Affairs that remains largely untouched, other than the changes that the last government made that we really were very much against with respect to how they treated visitors and migrants to Barbados. We believe that the unit of the family is not just the children but the grandchildren, and therefore in the same way that children should be able to become Barbadian citizens by descent, that grandchildren should be able to access Barbadian citizenship by descent, particularly if we recognize that we are underpopulated. So my government will in fact be moving to correct that in the next 6 months or so, I believe. And I say the next 6 months because we genuinely have a shortage of draftsmen, legislative draftsmen. And tomorrow we meet with the Commonwealth Secretary General, and it's one of the things that we will raise with her, because we've literally had to, with the repositioning of our international business sector and the other key pieces of legislation we've had to do, they have taken priority, literally because without that, Barbados would have faced some serious sanctions and challenges internationally. So I hope within the next 6 months we can get to some other pieces of social legislation like the Immigration Act and other key pieces that are necessary to keep our society functioning well. As to the sports hub, that's why I said it was going to be anchored at the top by the Legends Hotel once we can get the right set of Bajans interested in being willing to come together and to plan out a chain. It's easy to go and get Marriott or Four Seasons or Wyndham or whoever else to come and sign, but then you're sending back out the franchise fees, etc. We want to be able to be known as a mature tourism destination that has brands that go beyond, as I said, Coral Reef, Sandpiper, and those others. Those have all been done in the past. In the last 20 years, what new brands have we created in Barbados that are Bajan? Virtually none. So I hope that that will anchor it, and that we go right down from Kensington towards the water sports, towards Wisers, towards beach volleyball, beach football. I teased Randy Harris yesterday, and I told him that I believe that the women's football team will get to the World Cup before the men's. And that we will also, and we should also seek to make ourselves one of the top 10 beach football nations in the world. And those are the things that I think will make a defining difference in the strategic targets that we can set. But we can't just be idly performing, okay, without a mission in hand. I think Sir Gary would tell us that he knew what he intended to do at every stage and in every way when he had his path to greatness in cricket. And we need to do the same thing in the other sports that we want to be able to do. I know that Sir Charles has made polo a preeminent sport for the country too, and others have gone in. But our island nation needs to take its ocean seriously and to be able to have as many maritime-based sports as possible, water polo, swimming, sailing, etc. They tell a story that all Barbadians were told that the sea ain't got no back door. And one group of people told their children, the sea ain't got no back door, so stay out of it. And the other group of people were told, the sea ain't got no back door, so learn to swim and sail. I think we need to learn and swim and sail, all, not just one group.
Is it working? Okay. Prime Minister, I just wanted to ask, for those of us or of Bayesian descent, how can you make the process of actually getting citizenship much more simpler and be more clarity in the steps of the process that we need to take?
Thanks. We recognize that it's not just a matter of legislation, but it's a matter of changing systems. And believe you me, we've been doing a lot of deconstruction of processes within the Immigration Department. So I would like to think that over the course of the next 12 months, all of the processes from both those things which you can do digitally, as well as I said just now, the legislation as to who can be entitled, and then the notion of shifting the burden of proof, because we held up a lot of processes by asking people for things that we really need not do. So that when an immigration officer used to ask people for a chest x-ray, I asked them, which one of you could read a chest x-ray? What you're really trying to do is to make sure that the person will not be a burden on the public treasury with health. That's not for citizens now, that's for people with work permits. I said, ask for the doctor's letter. So what we're doing is literally going through the entire set of processes, defining what is in the public interest that we need to protect, what is the public mischief that we need to move away from and make sure that we're not subject to people that would cause that mischief to become real. How do we use technology? In other words, that the things that you got to bring down in longhand and hard copy, nonsense. You should be able to pay online and you should be able to file online. And the government is in the process of a massive digitization project that will impact how immigration, police department with certificates of character, liquor licenses, driver's licenses, town planning, a whole host of departments we're trying now to put online over the course of the next 6 to 12 months with the digitization and the payment protocols. So hopefully that will help make your life a little easier. But as I said, we had to stop the bleeding first before we could get to what I call now those reform projects. But the good news is that they've started. Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone over there? Yeah?
See back here, Chair.
Yep. Back here.
Just two then.
Madam Prime Minister, first let me congratulate you for your historic victory
Thank you, ma'am.
last year and another achievement of a first. My point today is that the Barbados High Commissioner, the former one, His Excellency Guy Hewitt, was very instrumental in getting the British government to actually apologize to the people of the Commonwealth for what they did when they adopted the hostile environment immigration policy. I note that you're going to be meeting with the Commonwealth Secretary General tomorrow, and I'm wondering if, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm just wondering if it will come up as to what is being done for the Barbadian diaspora and by default the other Commonwealth citizens to help them through the Windrush process. And I'm asking this question because, especially in light of you're talking about the Vision 2020, a lot of Barbadians who do not have their status regularized cannot leave this country to come to Barbados to we gathering. So also it's going to impact upon the sending of money back to the country if they can no longer work because they can't prove their immigration status. So I'm just wondering whether there is going to be some discussion, if you can tell us what the Commonwealth Secretariat and the Government of Barbados, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, High Commission is going to be doing to help the Barbadian diaspora to be able to sort this out, because the Prime Minister did say that they were going to be resolving the cases within 2 weeks of presenting documentation. And there are hundreds and thousands of people who know that that is not the case.
Okay. I want to thank you for raising it again. And believe you me, this is a matter of concern to the government. Obviously, when it first broke, we were in opposition and we made it clear that we were concerned about it then. And for those who felt that it was only Jamaicans, we understand that they may have been the majority, but they were all Caribbean people who were affected. The Commonwealth Secretariat really isn't the body that can help us other than through advocacy. But the real heavy lifting will be us working with the British government to understand why the delays are taking place and to be able to impress upon them, as you correctly said, that there will be a number of Barbadians who will want to come home next year for We Gather in 2020, but who, as you correctly said, would not be able to be assured of re-entry because of the failure to have their papers regularized. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Trade and Diaspora Relations, I was very clear in the names that I gave the ministries because of what I expect from them. And I have every confidence that the team that we have here at London will continue to work on your behalf. Part of the difficulty, I suspect, is that normal service has not necessarily resumed here, and that the focus of the government has been on something that starts with B, but it's the wrong B. It's another B. I know we used to talk about BAR, BARB, but there's this BRE. So I suspect that that's half the problem. But we will keep you up to date. The High Commissioner says that he can actually give us an interim update, but the government will keep this as a front burner issue for us.
Yes, ma'am. In terms of that, the CARICOM caucus as a whole has been dealing with this issue, and we have made representation to the Home Office to have a meeting. What our concern is certainly is to ensure primarily that people get what is due to them. The government, as you know, has said that there is a 2-year period in which to put in your claims to get sorted out. Our concern is, A, when you go to the Home Office and you face someone in front of you and they say, I'm going to give you £5, that you are not due 50 and you just accept. There needs to be a process that we know what you get. We have had this discussion. We have dealt with some of the lawyers that have been dealing with this. So it's an ongoing process, okay? The other thing that we're very concerned about is there may be some people that are, for want of a better expression, under the radar. They may be afraid to present themselves in case they are now swooped up to be deported. And we've had a lot of that, particularly in the case of the Jamaican High Commission. There was a lot of at one stage, they had a plane ready to deport a number of people, and then that had to be sorted out. So we are in the process, as I said, of getting that. So as we go ahead, we will be giving you the necessary information and being able to provide the help for the citizens.
Do we have a Facebook page or a newsletter or anything that goes out to the community?
We are in the process actually of setting up that Facebook page now, and online service.
We need to have some kind of mechanism. Right, but apart from the email addresses, with the best will in the world, you still need to have some level of public information, because you don't know that you're capturing everybody. So what I'd like the High Commission to do is to establish a page that will be a form of public information.
Indeed.
So that people can know, and then you then have a designated person in the High Commission that people can call and come in and see. And I'm sure that the High Commission, the Deputy High Commissioner, can put that in place for us, even as they work cooperatively with CARICOM, because I do understand the importance of working regionally with the CARICOM brothers and sisters on this matter. There is strength in the unity. Okay, thank you for raising it, though.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Motley. I want to congratulate you as well. I'm one of the ones who stayed up with you all night until the final vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. What I really want to find out is, and I'm always saying it on your forums, I'm in the process of going back to Barbados, but what is hindering me right now is a mate of mine went into Barbados. She's returned to Barbados 3 years ago, and she encountered some problems with her duty-free concessions. So that's what I want you to really look at, the Returning National booklet. Because although the booklet, and I've got the booklet, says that you're entitled to X, Y, Z, when you get to customs, you're being charged astronomical amount of money. And it's like they're I'll give you
you don't need to. I've had to intervene. I've had to intervene in recent times on a few matters. And the bottom line is that we are trying to deal with some challenges that we've had at customs. Customs has not had an appointed control of customs since 2006. You cannot run a department with people acting. If not, you will become a Bollywood, but not in India. It will be a Bollywood in Bridgetown. But we do recognize also that we need to review the foreign operations within the ministry, and that's why I call it the diaspora relations as well. So suffice it to say that I've had cause to intervene twice in recent times. The other thing that we're doing is restructuring how we process applications for concessions, although there will be far less of them going forward because of the positions that we've taken. But I take the point, and it is a matter that is engaging us at this point. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes?
Hi, good evening. My heart is beating fast. My name is Valerie Suzette Jean-Marie, née Steele from Bel Air, St. Phillips. I'm British born. Yeah, okay.
A Bajan by descent.
Yeah, Bajan by descent, of which I'm actually about to start, a magazine / newspaper for Bajans by descent, named by the same name, BajanByDescent.com. Okay, that will be launched in September. So with regards to the question that the lady first asked formally, just before me, about where we can go for that kind of information, hopefully we can work together and that will be somewhere to go.
look forward to it.
All right, so
Forgive me.
that's my statement.
Yeah.
Here's my question, which is a lot more controversial. As I said, I am Bajan by descent. I was an alienated child, so I didn't get to the opportunity that most people have to actually get to know Barbados. I'm knowing Barbados now. I've been to Barbados a couple of times, and I will be going in a week's time, and I will be going again in September, and I will be going again and going again. But here's my question. My father passed away 31st of August 2017. And on his return, he returned to Barbados. On his return, I believe that he encountered financial elderly fraud. I want to know, what does one do when our fathers or our mothers return back from England and we believe or we suspect that this is actually occurring to them? You don't have to answer me now. I just want to put it out there that it actually happens, and I just would like to know what systems are actually put in place for parents, because most of the people that are wanting to return back prior to Vision 2020 will be the elderly, and I just really want to know what systems are put in place.
I hope they'll be all ages. There are, obviously, the obvious one is reporting to the police. But equally, the National Assistance Board helps to take care of elderly people in Barbados. And we're trying to settle a policy on elderly affairs because we recognize that Barbados' demographics are changing significantly. And in fact, part of our difficulty is that we do not have enough young people working to support the social security system with respect to the numbers of persons who are aging and living longer in the country. On the matter of elderly abuse, as I said, in the interim, between the police and the National Assistance Board and the ministry itself can seek to facilitate and to investigate. I know of cases that have been brought to the High Court, in fact, of persons for taking advantage of elderly people through fraudulent means.
So where should our first point of call be? Where could we go?
Police.
But we've tried this.
Sorry?
We did try this. My siblings and I, we tried this.
But it may be a case then of them not either having sufficient evidence or them not being responsive.
They didn't respond.
No
One question, I just want to ask, is it possible for us to try and make the High Commission a first protocol?
Certainly, and what they can do, either the High Commissioner or the Deputy High Commissioner can take the information and have the police follow up, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs manage the process. Okay, thank you so much, ma'am, and good luck with your newspaper. Thank you.
Good evening, Prime Minister. I'm asking this question on behalf of my sisters who are Bajan by descent. They would like to know, do you have any plans to change the current unfair situation where children or descendants can only become Bajan citizens of descent through their fathers and not their mothers? Now, this is a problem when the fathers themselves are not Bajans or not of Bajan parents.
I think that has been changed. I speak subject to correction, but I believe that has been changed. I think the problem comes in that there may be a loophole or lacuna that needs to be filled for children who were born to Bajan fathers that were not married before 1966. And the High Commissioner raised it with me earlier this week, and we've asked them to write us, and we are going to certainly get the Attorney General to look to close that loophole. But the disparity that existed, look, you know, and that's why I talk about moral and ethical leadership. So much of our systems and our legislation was premised on a government or a country that discriminated, and it discriminated against women. I came across in the Pensions Act only a couple weeks ago at Section 8 a provision that distinguishes as to who can retire, because in the public service, if you were getting married or about to marry in the public service, you could retire as a woman. And in 1985, the then government, Labour Party government, changed to be able to ensure that we remove some of those things with the discriminatory practices. So there are some, regrettably, some parts that are still discriminatory. The good news is that Cabinet agreed to the appointment of a Law Reform Commission a couple of weeks ago, and that Law Reform Commission is literally going to go through the laws of Barbados with the technical people systematically to try to bring into the 21st century our legislative environment. Okay, and that's why we need the draftsmen. But thank you.
Before you go ask your question, just let me remind you that we have limited time here, so just keep the questions short. The microphone is not working.
All right, next one.
1, 2.
Good evening. So you touched on it partially earlier, but what are your plans to help minimise the effects of global warming in Barbados?
What's your name? What's your name?
Sine.
Sorry?
Sine.
I'm asking you that because as much as we are going to fight it as a country, and believe you me, half of the speeches that I've had to give in the last year have been about climate change and global warming, because we recognize that we are not on the front line of the battle in terms of causing it, but we are on the front line of the battle in terms of the consequences of it. And that's why there's the notion of climate refugees in Dominica, in Barbuda, and we hope and pray that we can minimize the damage. But the bottom line is, it is large countries and large companies across the globe who refuse to take the action to be able to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, because we need 1.5 to survive as a coral island. But when the world met in Paris a few years ago, they agreed to aspire to 2 degrees, and they're still now saying that it might be more like 3. Now that puts Greenland, the Antarctic and the Arctic summer sheets, and the coral islands of the world, which are us, at risk. And therefore, half of what you see us doing is engaging in advocacy, pressure, but we recognize that states alone, countries alone will not be sufficient to win this battle. When I was a student in this country, there was a wicked and evil regime in South Africa called the apartheid regime. And the people who made the difference were not the prime ministers of the world or the people in government. It was young and old people on the streets making the difference and calling for action and calling for moral and ethical leadership. Earlier in my speech, I talked about the requirement for moral and ethical leadership, and global warming is one of those things that requires of us that courage and tenacity to provide that leadership. But I also want you and everyone in this room to know that it is going to be young people like yourself in particular who are going to be affected 20, 30, 40 years from now, who must be on the front line, pushing governments, taking control of popular culture, writing, doing stuff in universities. You are going to be the ones that will push the decision making in government in the same way that those in my generation made it possible for us to see the back of a wicked apartheid regime in South Africa. I mean, Jerome is reminding me, apart from the broader picture, in our own way, even though we know that it is going to be limited, there's an old Bajan saying that your grandparents might have taught you about called one one blow is kill old cow. And as a result of that, we ourselves have taken the very principled position that by 2030, Barbados must be a carbon neutral nation at worst and a fossil fuel free nation at best. So that we're doing all that we can do to be able to promote renewable energy, to be able to ensure that we can minimize the use of fossil fuels on those things that we can. For example, we won't be able to tell an airplane not to use it, so there'll still be some use by an airplane or a cruise line, although I see with the finding of Carnival recently, they too may be pushed to more and more clean fuels or other forms of power. Seriously, we also are pushing the renewable energy to be able to help us reach that 2030 limit on shore, and to recognize that even though we may have oil and gas resources in our maritime boundaries, we would want to be able to export that and not use it on island in Barbados, because we believe fundamentally that that one blow change begins with us and not just with only those who we're trying to persuade to do the right thing. Okay.
Hi, Prime Minister. I have a one-year-old daughter, so you're very inspirational to me and in tandem her. I'm Jonathan. I work in the NHS, and the question for you are two questions. First one is the QEH. You're going to develop the emergency services. What are your plans for the elective services, for the retention of staff, for the development of technology? Jamaica are using keyhole surgery. Patients are staying 1 day. Why should we be using big open cuts and keeping them in for days on end? And the second question is, there are a lot of young, dynamic professionals from Barbados, from CARICOM. They're fearful to come back. They've tried to. They've been turned away. What would you say to them?
Thank you. Three weeks ago, I had a medical investment colloquium in Barbados where, and I didn't do it in the eyes of the public for obvious reasons, but I brought together most of the major doctors in the country, and we pointed out to them that 55–60% of the money spent in healthcare in Barbados is in fact spent in the private sector, not the public, and that we need to redefine how we build out our healthcare system going forward. That I don't have the luxury of trying to find $1 billion to build a new hospital, but that if we redefine the hospital complex as not just the actual QEH, but everything, for argument's sake, from Belleville to Martindale's Road, that immediately there is a new energy that we can ride upon in terms of improving technology and opening up opportunities. Similarly, the hospital has 11 theaters, right, Jerome? And the majority of them operate only for 8 hours a day. We do not have the luxury of having spent that kind of money in operating theaters for them to function on so limited a basis. And to that extent, therefore, we need a public-private partnership between the hospital and private providers to give them access to the theaters. They must pay in addition for what they use, but that will help offset some of the costs that we will carry in the provision of public services to persons within the system. Similarly, we need to be able to identify what we need to spend money on in terms of capital, like the A&E, and what the private doctors are doing and spending money on, such that we can partner and access the services, particularly utilizing other powers of government to make it accessible and affordable for all. So, good news that we'll see the sector as not constrained by just what we have in the public space, but redefining the public and private space to be a national space. And the other good news is that I am shortly going to be appointing a Prime Ministerial Commission for the transformation of healthcare in Barbados, with 3 distinct subcommittees, one on primary, one secondary, and one addressing tertiary healthcare, and looking not just at Bajans in Barbados, but we recognize that we have exported more healthcare and educational professionals than perhaps any other category of professionals across the world. So you come to England, you go to Washington, D.C., you go to certain parts of the world, Toronto, the number of Bajans in healthcare will hurt your head at all levels. And we need to be able to utilize and create those opportunities with us as a hub. The simple answer to the last point is this. I don't believe in hearsay. So I have to ask you the question, what would encourage you to come home?
Make it all there. I'm already coming home. I'm trying to get people like him and her and her.
That's what you call consummating a marriage. I'm told that you have done some robotics, and that you therefore will make sure that when others speak about one day in and out, that it won't only be in Jamaica they'll be talking about, but also about you and the others in Barbados doing it. Look, we were very careful in our manifesto to talk about Barbados as a hub for education and medical services. We believe that we can do so many things. And along the spectrum of medical services and educational services, there are true opportunities. If you check the Global Competitiveness Index, those are the 2 areas that Barbados is most globally competitive for: healthcare and education. If it's not, others have not been able to take that from us. We need to fine-tune it, and we need to make it work better, and we need to increase the scale of investment. But we can't do it as a government alone. We need everybody to do it. All right?
Good evening, Prime Minister. That was a really inspirational talk. My name is Pamela Franklin. I chair a group called the Caribbean Social Forum, which aims at people from 50 plus from all of the Caribbean. Something that came up recently was the relationship with the NHS. Some people left the country for longer than 6 months, and when they came back, they were told in certain islands they were no longer entitled to the NHS service because it's a residential care. And the second thing that's happened, I understand in some of the islands, their pensions is being frozen. I don't believe it's the same for Barbados, but in some cases, the pensions has been frozen. Will that eventually happen to Barbados if people retire? Will their pensions be frozen?
No,
Thank you.
I'd be very surprised. We have a pension arrangement between our NIS and the British government, and I would be very surprised. So we operate on the basis of predictability and certainty. We are going to be making changes, not to this, but to other aspects of public service pensions in Barbados, but it will not affect existing public servants, because these things are best handled planning for the future rather than affecting those who are present. So it is highly unlikely, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. My name is Wendy. I'm Bajan by descent. I also work, I'm an entrepreneur. I also work with a few other ladies in this room who are also Bajans by descent. Curly Treats, who does a big natural hair festival, and also this book club, who's doing amazing stuff with multicultural books. Back in 2017, beginning of 2018, I decided to create the Radiate Windrush Festival. This is before the Windrush scandal actually happened, because for me, I felt a disassociation with my Bajan heritage, my Jamaican heritage, and also I didn't feel British enough. So I wanted to find a way that I could actually take some ownership over my identity, creating the Radiate Windrush Festival. One of the first things I did, being a Bajan, having been to Barbados for 3 months plus, I came to Barbados High Commission and Tourism Board and I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. How can you get behind what I'm doing so that we as CARICOM nations and also Bajans can really celebrate who we are, where we come from in a big way? Because one of the things about this country is it socially marginalises you. It makes you small, it makes your culture small. And a lot of people are profiting off of our culture and we are not. and it's a problem. Again, so they gave me one single flight as a sponsorship to Barbados. Couldn't even take a brethren. Yeah? Gotta be real. 2019, I came back again. And I funded the Radiate Windrush Festival myself, my money. Shouldn't have to do that. Again, I came back, I said, hey, I'm here again. And Guy Hewitt did amazing work. Said, I'm here again. You know, how can you get behind? Look, we're gathering. If you want people to gather, use a large-scale event. I got 2,000 plus people each day to my event by word of mouth alone. How can we use We Gathering to make it a headline banner in the Radiate Windrush Festival to say, you know what, 2020, we're gathering, all of you come, you know, and take ownership over the Windrush. So it's not a scandal, it is a celebration of migration, of our Caribbean migration history in this country. What we lost, what we also gained, but also what we can bring back.
I can't speak to what happened in the past. I don't have eyes in the back of my head. But what I can tell you is that I'd like you to go back in, but there are some threshold points that you have to meet because government has limited funds, and we would have made a determination to treat the tourism as a joint public-private endeavor going forward, because we have to start to transition some things out of the straight public sector and utilizing taxpayers' money alone, and we have to become more entrepreneurial.
Sorry, sorry, not to cut you. It's not about tourism. For me, tourism is an aspect. It's about repatriation. So me as a Bajan by descent...
I got you, you know.
I'll say that again?
I get you so much.
Okay, thank you.
I was the one who was responsible, first and foremost, for the World Conference Against Racism back in 2001, and the only reason I didn't go to Durban is that I was made Attorney General the day before and had to send Sir Hilary Beckles, who, as you know, is now leading the effort on reparations. I get you in terms of what you're doing, the first chapter of the Covenant of Hope, which is the document that my party set out before a manifesto, is called A New National Consciousness. But the bottom line is that we've also inherited a government that faced, as I told you, every form of institution and infrastructure has been broken, so that the only way we can move forward with limited funds and limited capacity is by thinking outside of the box. So what I want you to do, and I've asked the tourism people as well, to become far more entrepreneurial in how they assess things. Similarly, the reason why we're having the gathering is to reinforce that national identity. But we're not going to be able to do all the things that we want to do at this point in time. That will start creeping again. You know, when you have an accident and you get break up, you have an operation, you got to recover, then you got to have physiotherapy, and you start small, and each day you get a little stronger, but that's how the country is now. So I'm asking you to stay the course with us, but there are some things that we might be able to do, but we need to have an entrepreneurial approach to it, particularly look at who spends money in Barbados, who is making money in Barbados, are they affected, can they be brought along, etc. Does that make sense, ma'am?
For me, it's not even about the money. You know, it's the participation. It's the underpinning.
It's about
bring
the
some
respect.
banners. Yeah, it's about bringing some banners and your resources. I don't want your money. I want the support.
And that's the point. And that's what I'm saying. Send it forward. Let me look at it. Let us look at it. Because the truth is that what am I here asking you to do? I'm here asking you to let many hands make light work. So long as it's not illegal or immoral, we with you.
Yes. You good?
Hello?
I'm going to ask Jerome to take I have a nature call, so Jerome will take a question.
So my question is related to tourism. What does the Barbados government have? Do they have any plans to encourage millennials, Gen Z and the younger generation to travel to Barbados? Because quite often they're traveling to places like Dubai, Bali, Miami, and Barbados doesn't seem to be in the question as much as I feel like it used to be.
Thank you for the very interesting question. I'm surprised. Indeed, the person who leads this effort is sitting almost in arm's reach of you. Perhaps she might want to respond to this.
Thank you very much for your question. Just to say that we recognize that a number of millennial and many other young people like to travel for festivals, concerts, and so on. And so our effort, certainly in the last few years, has been that of promoting Barbados as more than just a beach holiday. We've been working with many other tour operators. We've had a much stronger online presence with OTAs such as Expedia and so forth. We've seen significant growth in visitor arrivals between the ages of 15 and 25 in the last 3 years. So we think our efforts are already beginning to take root, and you'll be hearing more and more from us in terms of all the festivals that we're promoting. We've added things like our reggae festivals, or Crop Over obviously is a very big time of the year for us. And yes, in the last few years we're seeing quite a few more people of your age group traveling to Barbados. What we would like to do as well, however, is to let you know that we've also just relaunched our BFF, our Barbados Friends and Family Program, and we're reaching out to a lot of the young people in our community and in our diaspora. Cedric, who is here with me, I'm sure many of you in the room know Cedric. That program is actually a loyalty program. It started a few years ago and it became dormant, and we relaunched that at the High Commissioner's home just in February last year. It's a channel through which you can work alongside us. You can earn points on bookings which can be converted to cash and other rewards. And we would like to invite more young persons like yourselves in our community to work alongside us, to help us to build out the younger visitors to Barbados and also benefit from doing so.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And before we go any further, we have about 20 minutes or so before the time for use here is up. So what we're going to do, we're going to ask you to just ask your questions. We will take note and we will answer them. Take note, Joe.
Yes, I was inspired by the Prime Minister's futuristic vision for the country and taking it forward. My specific question is for the youth and the crime in Barbados. And that starts with taking the young people forward. And I want to know what are the plans for the child protection via the Child Care Board of Barbados for the protection, given that you had 3 unexplained deaths in Barbados for children. What are the rights? What are being done for the rights to protect the child protection laws of Barbados?
We inherited a draft child protection bill, which in fact came to Cabinet about a month ago. And we indicated as a cabinet that it is not in an acceptable form, and that we want to modernize how we treat the child protection and children's rights from a criminal justice system that is as old as Queen Victoria's criminal justice system of the 19th century. In many instances, it is going to mean having to rethink some of the things that we did hitherto. And, for example, there are some children who are not only, the easy part is protecting those whose rights have been affected, because the law is there and it needs to be enforced. The difficult part is reaching those children who may need an intervention, but who through no fault of their own are not getting it from the homes in which they're placed. And the law needs strengthening, and in many instances the schools which they attend are not structured to give the support that those children need. So what we are discussing is moving beyond where we went with the Edna Nichols School, because prior to that, in 1995-96, if you suspended a child for bad behavior at school, they just stayed home and went on the block. which meant that the child was just getting the opportunity to do more of that which they were suspended for. And we created the Edna Nichols School for that early intervention on a day basis. But we always knew that that would not work with every child, and that we really need to create a residential facility that can allow, it's not a criminal justice facility like Dodds and Somerville, but it allows the state to be able to step in and to help raise those children who, for whatever reason, are not being raised properly. And it can't be done in a children's home under the Child Care Board, because that's just a different setup totally. So we recognize that we may have to have either the parents or the Chief Education Officer and the Child Care Board jointly apply to make the child a ward of a court in order to be able to help intervene, particularly for teenagers that are experiencing challenging times. And there are parents in this room who will tell you that if they didn't have strong will, that some of the children would have gone off straight too. So that the fact that a child may have challenging behavior does not mean that they should be condemned for their whole life. And you're going to need people to intervene, to stabilize, and the state has to become far more willing to do some non-traditional things in order to be able to save more and more of our children. So we're going to protect them, but we're also going to intervene to save them. But it means that we can't take legislation that is boilerplate legislation and bring down. You have first to do those things that you really should do. Settle the policy as to what it is you want to do, how you're going to do it, and if it's sustainable, and if it does not breach the rights that you're guaranteed to protect under the Constitution, and then proceed and do it. So that will probably take another few months in order to get that right, probably another 6 to 12 months in terms of the legislative framework. Okay? We fully get it and appreciate it, and in fact you're absolutely correct, because you need a halfway house. But you see, this is where social capital, because the government in Barbados, and there's some people even in this audience who have been exceedingly generous, and who, without which them and a few other people in Barbados, we would not have gotten through the last decade. The amount of charitable donations that have been made in Barbados to stabilize the country with respect to the children's homes, with respect to families that have been disadvantaged, with respect to children who are differently able, with respect to our adolescent facility at the psychiatric hospital now. If those were not the subject of benefit of grants and charitable donations, we would be in so much more trouble, because the government was missing in action for the last decade. The bottom line is that we need to have a halfway house for those children who are no longer at the children's home because they are 18, as you said, but who have not yet found a job or some form of training, because you got to eat when the day comes. And people will exploit them if they have nowhere to go and from which they can get sanctuary or safety while they look for a job or while they study and train in post-secondary training. So you're absolutely correct, but these are the things that the government is trying to stabilize the country to be able to provide, along with charitable donations. It is a priority. I think we're going to be able to do 3 or 4 more questions. I don't know if we can get to everybody, because I'm being told that they've said that the security is leaving and they're going to leave us out of the building. So let's go. There's some of you who I know I will see in Barbados, so those of you who I can see in Barbados, leave it to the ones that I won't see in Barbados. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Akil Benjamin.
This is the final question.
No, I can take 3. I said 3 or 4.
3 or 4 more questions.
Quick ones.
Hello, good evening. My name is Akil Benjamin. Thank you for your talk. Sorry if my question seems trivial, but I do believe in your message. So I just want to ask, why does the visual language and messaging outside of your talk today only show Bajans in service and in entertainment?
Wait, what?
Outside of your talk today, why does the visual messaging of Barbados, and even on the board up top, only show Bajans in service and entertainment?
I don't know, but I can tell you that I haven't done any messaging yet. So, I mean, you were correct in saying outside of my talk. So I'm trying to get things to change. Look,
only these two. The rest were all Bajans in service, delivering drinks, shaking drinks, playing the guitar, playing dominoes. That's it. And if you're telling us to come home, and if you're asking us to come home and invest in home, why is this what we're going home to?
No, that's not what you're going home to. Trust me. Look, I spoke to you earlier and I said that we have over $2 billion in savings in the credit union movement. When I look around the country and I look at who owns a lot of the major companies, what Bajans are doing, we have a trade surplus with the Eastern Caribbean states, and it's predominantly ordinary Bajans supplying services from laboratory skills, all kinds of skills, all kinds of small business companies. The SBA has over 11,000 companies. But I take your point that if and I'm not here, haven't been here for 10 years, I haven't seen what the visuals look like in the advertising campaign here. But I know that Sagari ain't serving, and I know Rihanna ain't serving, and I know that those others that we've tried to put forward aren't. Similarly, you've heard me say that I'm going to announce shortly local participation in renewable energy and in medical cannabis. And then you heard me speak also to the large plethora of health and educational skills. So, you know, there's a lot to do, sir. A lot. A lot.
Thank you.
We're going to take 2 more questions.
My question is not new, but I'm very passionate about it, so I'm going to ask it. And simply I want to find out, in terms of the legal system in Barbados, is there any regulation in terms of how our money is protected when we send it out of the country, and then we've got to find ourselves in dire straits, back and forth, trying to get our money back from the person we've given it to? We've got property, we've got sales pending, and I just want to understand. I have a situation since 2013, we're in 2019, and nothing was ever done. So I just want to understand if there's going to be regulations to tighten that area, because it's given Barbados a bad name outside of the country.
And believe you me, I've heard you all in every city that we've been to, and the legal profession needs to get its act together. I've spoken to the Attorney General, and I've asked him to look at the reform of the Legal Profession Act. Regrettably, we speak in a week in which a Barbadian lawyer was convicted and sent to prison this week. So that the system does respond to complaints. Perhaps it has taken long in the past, but we do accept that we need a modern Legal Profession Act to bring about greater accountability, because it has given the country a very bad name in the diaspora for those professionals who have not been responsive in their fiduciary responsibilities. And in everything else the government is doing, we're trying to enhance accountability. And lawyers will be no different, even though people feel that lawyers are a protected class. They're not. And in fact, one of the things that we found out in the last election was that since the last election, is that a lot of the money and the legal fees that were charged by lawyers to government bore no relationship to reality whatsoever. And as a result of that, investigations have been continuing to be able to get to the bottom of it. Okay?
Thank you.
Good night, Prime Minister.
Good night, sir.
And also good night to the Right Excellency Garfield. I have one question, but from the outset, let me please congratulate you on your historic victory. Ever since your days at Queen's College when it was at Constitution Road, I knew this would be an eventuality at some time. But I have one burning issue. Having been born in this country, went to Barbados when I was 4 years old, spent 54 years in Barbados. And I've come back here to England, and I'm living in London, and there's one glaring omission that I see. Barbados is virtually invisible in London. For a country that has been referred to as Little England, I don't see many products of Barbadian origin on the shelves. No. I will tell you what I've seen. I've seen Shirley biscuits, and I've seen Wilmil pepper sauce. Right. But when I go, excuse me, this is a bit. When I go to the supermarket, most of the products I see are from Jamaica. When I go to the pubs,
I hear you.
The beers, Red Stripe.
However much we've done, the point is that there's room for significant improvement.
Thank you.
On Monday,
that's what I like to see.
On Monday, I met with the rum industry, for example, in Barbados, and I told them, look, we're not satisfied for rum to be an $80 million industry, and that's 80 million Barbados dollars. Rum, the story of rum is the story of Barbados, and the story of Barbados is the story of rum. The word rum comes from Barbados, and there's so many things that we can be doing that we're not doing. So I use that as an example because the other key things, we don't have a lot of competitive advantage in a lot of areas of manufacturing, but we do have it in a few things. We have it in rum. We have it potentially in black belly sheep. We have it potentially in West Indies Sea Island cotton. We have it potentially in pepper sauce, although even that is just a case of flavor and what you want. We have it potentially in those things that Bajans got a taste for, which is why we say to Chefette, set up a franchise and open a Chefette in London and Birmingham and Manchester. Because even though Trinidadians will tell you that the roti is not a roti, it is our roti. So that I take your point, sir, and we are trying to work with others, and there are Bajans all over that are trying to scale. Thank you, sir. That's fine. Lord bless you.
Just one more question.
I got even
I'm sorry.
To one-on-one and we're done.
Huh?
So who drawing lots?
Hello. Oh, hi. Firstly, I want to thank you for your service to date and your continued service going forward. The only question I have, my dad recently started his EQ Barbados, and it's about service and our service industry. And whereas Barbadians, we tend to service the tourists, but when we service ourselves, is a different.
Agreed.
And I'm wondering, how do we start that from
Agreed.
our children? Let me being a Barbadian.
Let me answer you right away. The government this week, in fact, did interviews for the people to head up the RIRI program. And the RIRI program is about retooling and empowering, retraining and enfranchising. And we've said, look, the whole of Barbados has to become a training campus for the next 4 years. And what is it that we're trying to do? Define excellence in every job. What does it take to do this job that in a way that reflects excellence? 2, who can train the person to excellence, whether it is a car washer or whether it is a lawyer, whether it is a waiter or whether it is a doctor or engineer. It doesn't matter what the job is. We need to know what excellence looks like, and we need to train to excellence. If we can certify, who can certify? And then who monitors the habit of excellence? Because excellence is a habit. And as a result, we've put some money We've taken the training levy. Some of it will continue to go to the TVET, Technical Invocation and the Skills Training Body, but we've added to it and we've said, look, we need to do this training in the public and private sector, because unless there is a common mission, which is to be the best Barbadian that each can be by attaining excellence in your job, then we're not doing anything. So if you want to wash my car, don't have no grit in your chamois. You understand? If you want to be my lawyer, then come, and if you're going to deliver service, deliver it to time, as the young lady said just now, and communicate with people. If you want to be a waiter, you got to come and you got to smile and you got to do the things properly and service people properly. If you want to be a plumber, you got to come and fix the thing properly and don't overcharge me and just perform. So whatever it is, and what is the message in that? Who is your audience? It's not tourists, it's Bajans. So that, and I'll say this last point, for those who say that you do things for tourists, the things that tourists like most are the things that are done for nationals, because it has an authenticity and a sincerity in it. And that's what we're trying to do at home. Thanks.
I'm going to be really quick. You asked for us to bring our skills home. I tried contacting government probably 4 or 5 times. I have a business transformation company that focuses on both project program, business change and behavioural change. When can I start working?
I know that they advertised for one set recently, but the work is so much that, trust me, that's what the RERE program is. So if you can, I have a permanent secretary who is hiding right there. She can raise her hand for you, and she will be more than happy to talk to you and others to see how we can involve you in the system. But I'd like to say this as we end, High Commissioner, and I go back, Linda smiled when I talked about it, to the Jimmy Cliff moment. We have tried too often to do a database of skills and database of interests. It cannot be that in the 3rd decade of the 21st century, because that's effectively where we're going to be in a few months, that with this, that we cannot literally create a proper directory of Barbadians, Barbadian descendants with interests and with skills, because you may have an interest that is not necessarily your trained area, and therefore we need to be able to separate out the two. But let us set ourselves the mission, as I've said in other cities, that by the end of 2020 December, we have that directory. I spoke earlier about how the Israelis treat to the people and children of Israel. And without trying to be facetious in any way, we have to claim our own, to tell our story, and to create and make the best Barbados possible. Okay? Star, you looking pain, talk quick.
Very quick. Thanks for sharing the short and medium term strategy in terms of investment with hoteliers. I wanted to know if there was an opportunity to use ordinary people doing extraordinary things across the UK, Canada, US, of which I believe I'm one, in terms of innovation and really getting some of your entrepreneurs, new business people with the skills we possess, helping to drive revenues forward for Barbados in the future. So any workshops or things of that nature, any plans?
I knew there was a reason why I called on you. Go to my PS2. Yes, and the short answer is yes. Look, I never knew Carlton Cummins before I saw him on British television. Carlton Cummins is a young Barbadian who invented a different form of batteries to be able to lengthen the process of photovoltaics batteries. We are now in discussions with him, with Barbados National Oil Company and others, to see how we can work together to be able to make his invention real and not just available to Bajans, but to be able to be available globally. You hear me talk about Rihanna all the time, because what Rihanna has done has been nothing short of extraordinary in terms, and it doesn't happen by a stroke of luck. It happens because she has a vision and she's a hard worker and she literally stays the course to do what at 18 years old, I heard her say on a TV program in an interview. She didn't say, I want to build a business or when I build a successful business. She said, when I build my empire. And I never forgot it. And she has built an empire and is still building it. So believe you me, whatever you can offer that is in terms of innovation, we're going to do it. And I say this to you to encourage you. We use the word entrepreneur, which really comes from a French and Latin derivative, which really means taken in between. And it is because at home, if you open a business and it failed once, people might don't mind, he's a failure. In another country, people who have become successful might have failed 5 and 6 and 7 times. I told you I'm a Jimmy Cliff girl. You understand? And therefore, I do not look down on anybody whose enterprise may have failed on the first, second, third, or fourth outing. But you don't know when that moment of glory will come or when it will take root. So we're going to work with you so long as it is not illegal and it is not immoral.
Is that working? I don't even need an answer. Thank you for everything, Honourable Minister and Excellencies. I work in African trade and business advisory, so I was glad to hear the references to Rwanda. Great success story, and as you did, I've changed my question to misogyny, domestic abuse, and LGBTQ rights and acceptance on the island. Just quickly, I know women back home have taken domestic abuse complaints to the police. Nothing's been done. I know someone who's receiving domestic abuse from her police officer husband. She has nowhere to go. She's tried different forces, but it always ends up making it worse. Are there shelter plans for these victims to escape to? And with regard to misogyny, I'm part of the Bayesian diaspora WhatsApp group here. It's hundreds of members, but just a few excerpts from recently. Women, especially those over 50, enjoy the attention from all males.
If I may,
oh, sorry.
Because I get it. There's a difficult conversation that Bajans have to have, and this good news is that we're old enough to have it. We are 53 years as a nation this year, and like with every family, or like with every human being, life is not a rose garden. And there are some difficult conversations that we have to have. Part and parcel of the difficulty has been that we have been influenced by values and mores and laws. You heard me talk earlier about the discrimination against women in the pensions law, in the Constitution. You heard me talk earlier about, no I didn't with you, I did it elsewhere, about the closed nature of fraternities, okay? I have learned in life to speak truth to power and to be transparent. Just now I wanted to go to the bathroom. I didn't give you a story. I said nature calls because I have made it my business to tell people that there is no moment of truth that is too difficult for us to talk about as a nation or as a people. And if we accept that, and we accept that life is not a rose garden, but we accept equally that we have the same desire for a common output, for a better life for our people, to treat people the way how you want to be treated. That's the golden rule. To recognize that the burden has to be shared, but if the burden is going to be shared, the bounty has to be shared. To be able to deal with things that may feel uncomfortable, but you don't get growth unless there's some pain. Period, human-wise or physically or otherwise. And therefore, the reality of being a society that is driven by patriarchal values, but is in fact run by women, single women, raised in families, is that discomfort that has to drive conversation. And it's not going to be done in the halls of parliament. It has to be done in the homes. It has to be done in getting people to understand that if you want to be treated this way, this is how we're going to have this conversation. I hear it also, and sometimes we don't give credit. There are a lot of young men nowadays who I see taking care of their children in a way that I never saw them take care of them 30, 40 years ago. There are a lot of single young men in Barbados who are taking their children up, some of them are even living with them, so that there's progress. Is it enough, and is it at the pace that some of us would like? No. By the same token, there are a lot of women who perpetuate the negative self-image of women, and we have to have that conversation. So there's going to be a joint approach, and that's why my government created a social justice committee that functions separate from the social partnership, because we recognize that leadership is not only about the role of government, but it is about the role of leading a society. And that's why I talk about moral and ethical leadership, because if we get the small things right in the homes and in the communities, it becomes easier to take that as the total representation to get the big things right. So there's a part of the Talmud, and I'll end on this, that when I first went into public life, Dame Billy shared with me, and I've kept it: we're not expected to complete the task, but neither are we at liberty to resile from it. I am not a Jew, but London had a chief rabbi called Jonathan Sacks, whose works have inspired me throughout my public life. He had a book called The Politics of Hope. He has another one called The Dignity of Difference. He has another one called To Heal the World. And the reason why, in fact, in our Covenant of Hope, we have a direct quotation from Jonathan Sacks about the definition of a covenant: to do those things together which neither of us can achieve alone. If we want our society to evolve, if we want our society to be better than it is, to allow us to appeal to the higher angels of our nature, as Obama would say, then it is going to require some conversations that may be difficult. But truth is the anchor upon which difficulty can be conquered. And principles only mean something if it is inconvenient to stand by them. Will we achieve 100%? No. Will we get an A+? No. But can we move our society and our country in a positive direction, trending upwards? Yes. And it will take time. And this generation must not drop the baton. We can keep the race going, knowing that those who come after us have been imbued with a sense of what is right and what is wrong, to allow them to keep running to, just as we were imbued by those who went before. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the session. We certainly would like to thank the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister for coming here to be with us this evening. We also want to thank all of those who would have made a contribution to this session to make it so successful. The floral decorations, I think Shakira is responsible for this as well. We want to thank all of you. And thank you for being here. You have been wonderful. And the next time, we hope to see you again. Travel safely and have a good night.